the rest in with our own experience and knowledge. And I think with Vladimir Putin, there's a lot of clues in public, and some of the other bits you have to fill in for yourself.
Thank you for listening to the interview from the BBC World Service. You'll find more in-depth conversations on The Interview wherever you get your BBC podcasts, including episodes with the author Sir Salman Rushdie, Nobel Peace Prize winner Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, and the Venezuelan conductor Gustavo Dudamel. Until the next time, bye-bye for now.
From the BBC, that was...
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Friday Morning Show. You're on CBC, 89.3 FM, 990 AM on that app and YouTube. I'm Marcy Marcusa, and thanks for joining us. In the city this morning from our CBC downtown studios, ice crystals outside, minus 14, and that's Winnipeg. Brandon, mostly cloudy, minus 17. Up in Churchill, some ice crystals, minus 23. And in Thompson this morning, it's mostly cloudy as well, and it's also minus 17. Winnipeg for today, mix of sun and cloud, and then this afternoon, periods of snow are expected. Our high today is minus 8. Brandon, you're also expecting the exact same forecast, but with stronger winds 30 to 50. And then in Thompson today, your high is minus 14, and you'll see some periods of light snow as well. Thanks for being here. Morning show's on air till 8:37. Corey Funk is the director and covers the commute. Abby Adeyemi is behind the controls, our senior tech. Morning, Abby. Abby also covers the weather on air. And good morning to Mr. Brad Lillies, who is behind the controls of our YouTube stream. Megan Ketchison is in for Heather Wells this morning at 2 minutes to 6. Meeks is here with our news headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, we're learning more details about a former Winnipeg police officer on trial for drug trafficking. CBC spoke to a woman who knew Elston Bostock when he was a constable with the Winnipeg Police Service. We're not identifying her due to fear of reprisals for speaking out, but she says Bostock could always be counted on at parties to get his friends high. Bostock pleaded guilty this week to drug trafficking. And carvers are building a winter wonderland in Clear Lake. They're putting the finishing touches on a giant snow pavilion nestled in the heart of Wasagaming. The snow fort, dubbed Clarso Snow Pavilion, is being created to encourage winter tourism, and we'll have more coming up at 6:30.
That sounds beautiful.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, totally. Got to put that on the list. Thank you, Megan.
You're welcome.
On the program this morning, we're going to talk to good old Frosty Face Manitoba. He's had that account online for so long promoting winter activity. So what does he suggest for the winter of 2026? We'll talk to him in the second hour of the show. Also, in the first hour of the program, times are financially tough, especially after the holidays. It can be hard to find things as well to do with your family. Winnipeg Film Group is once again hosting Cabin Fever every Sunday. We'll talk about what films are on tap for this year. In addition, as we look south, this week the U.S. reduced the list of recommended childhood vaccines. We'll talk about what impact that could have on Canadians making choices here. And so stay tuned for that. Right now, though, it's time for World Report.
Today on Q.
I'm Talia Schlanger in for Tom Power. After building a loyal fan base in the 80s and 90s, the Canadian singer Jane Siberry sold everything she had and moved to a cabin in the woods. She'll tell you about being a free spirit and how she's used her sensitivity to her advantage.
Q, this morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm John Northcott. Iran's supreme leader is telling Donald Trump to focus on problems at home and leave Iran alone. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei made the remarks in a televised speech as anti-government protests spread to more than 100 cities and towns. He accused demonstrators of, quote, ruining their own streets to play up to the U.S. Crystal Gamansing has more.
With buildings and cars set alight in the capital, Tehran, anti-regime chants ring out. Actions, according to Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, of rioters wanting to please U.S. President Donald Trump. After a 12th straight night of demonstrations across the country, Khamenei appeared on state television this morning, warning the Islamic Republic will not tolerate mercenaries for foreigners. The U.S. president has repeatedly threatened to intervene militarily if Iranian authorities kill protesters. The demonstrations began late December with frustrations over Iran's failing economy. Shop owners in Tehran's Grand Bazaar taking to the streets. Security forces quickly tried to quash the demonstrations, but they've continued, growing in size and spreading to other cities. With internet access nearly shut down, reaching people in Tehran and getting a clear sense of those killed or injured is difficult. Human rights groups estimate 40 people have died. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance said Thursday the regime has many problems.
I'll let the president speak to what we're going to do in the future, but we certainly stand with anybody across the world, including the Iranian people who are advocating for their rights.
The son of Iran's late ruling Shah, Reza Pahlavi, is encouraging people to keep going to the streets, posting to social media, "The eyes of the world are upon you." He's living in exile in the U.S. Many protesters are calling on him to come home. Crystal Gamansing, CBC News, London.
Donald Trump says he's canceling a second wave of attacks on Venezuela, saying it won't be needed. This, as Venezuela has begun releasing political prisoners.
Que es materialmente imposible.
One of those freed is opposition figure Enrique Marquez, who ran in the 2024 presidential election, an election widely denounced as fraudulent. It's still unclear how many detainees are being released, but human rights groups estimate 800 to 900 political prisoners remain. The head of Venezuela's National Assembly, Jorge Rodriguez, calls the move a gesture to, quote, consolidate peace. Another shooting by federal immigration officials prompts renewed outrage at the Trump administration. 2 people were shot and injured yesterday in Portland, Oregon, and as Steve Futterman reports, the incident sparked more overnight protests.
It was a tense night in Portland. Hundreds of protesters gathered just hours after 2 people were shot. Unlike Minneapolis, where an ICE officer did the shooting, in Portland it was Border Patrol agents. According to the Department of Homeland Security, the shooting followed a targeted stop. Agents specifically stopped a vehicle they said belonged to a member of a Venezuelan gang. The person driving then allegedly tried to run over one of the agents, then sped away. Shots were fired. Both people inside were injured. Those protesting in Portland overnight were skeptical. This woman accusing federal law enforcement of freely shooting people.
They have no problem shooting and killing American citizens. They have no problem shooting immigrants.
Portland Mayor Keith Wilson asked that all ICE activity immediately stop until an investigation takes place.
Our community deserves answers. Our community deserves accountability.
The fact that the Portland shootings came just one day after the Minneapolis killing only seemed to increase the anger and tension. Oregon Governor Tina Kotek.
We demand your cooperation because we need to investigate this incident efficiently.
The one thing all officials have called for is calm. They do not want U.S. President Donald Trump to once again target their city with the National Guard. Steve Futterman, CBC News, Phoenix.
Meanwhile, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz is asking Americans to join his state for a day of unity today. He's encouraging people to pause at 10 a.m. for a moment of silence to remember Renee Good. She was shot and killed by ICE agents this week.
I'd ask each and every one to find a way to contribute in your community. It might be shuffling your neighbor's walk. It might be being at a food bank. But to show the goodness, to rise up, to make sure that we're being very, very clear about this, that we expect our constitutional rights to be respected.
Walz says state officials should be running the investigation into the shooting of Renee Good, but the Trump administration has blocked them from being involved. For the second time, Russia says it has fired one of its Oreshnik hypersonic missiles at Ukraine. Moscow claims the strike was in retaliation for a Ukrainian drone attack on one of Vladimir Putin's residences last month, an allegation Kyiv flatly denies. Russian officials say the missile hit energy infrastructure and a drone-making facility in western Ukraine. Meanwhile, Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, was hit overnight by a wave of Russian drones. 4 people are dead and critical infrastructure damaged. Around 6,000 residents spent the night without power. Here at home, emergency room physicians in Alberta are warning that acute care in the province is in crisis. Demand is overwhelming, resources are stretched thin, and some doctors say the situation is so dire the government should declare a formal state of emergency. Julia Wong explains.
It's daily carnage. The overload of human misery is tough to witness.
Emergency physician Dr. Warren Thirsk isn't mincing words about what he sees on the job.
It's you and me and 100 people behind you waiting to get in front of me, fighting to get in front of me, and sometimes dying before they get in front of me.
The situation so serious, some doctors say the province needs to call a state of emergency. Dr. Paul Parks, the president-elect of the emergency section of the Alberta Medical Association, is behind the plea.
This is definitely on behalf of internal medicine physicians, hospitalists, and emergency physicians in Edmonton zone in particular, but definitely across our province. It's a plea for a systemic provincial-wide response.
The appeal comes mere weeks after a 44-year-old man died in an Edmonton hospital after allegedly waiting 8 hours in the emergency department. A declaration would give the Alberta government extra powers, says University of Alberta health policy professor Stephanie Montesanti.
It can enable expedited funding, emergency staffing measures.
But there are limits. It does not create hospital beds, more nurses, or more physicians, she says.
It's not going to address those deeply rooted structural reforms that are needed.
Alberta's Ministry of Primary and Preventative Health Services tells CBC News calls for a state of emergency are misguided and would add nothing to what is already being done. The province's hospital ministry points to plans for 1,000 new hospital beds in the future. Julia Wong, CBC News, Edmonton.
Former employees of a Calgary business are speaking out. The company's CEO has a record of failed companies that has left workers out tens of thousands of dollars. But as Ethel Musa reports, recouping their wages isn't easy.
It was looking at first, great opportunity.
Remy Loam says he was excited to work for Canopy, a travel startup based in Calgary. But he says things started to go downhill when his pay became irregular and then stopped altogether.
They were always explaining it was an issue with the investor.
According to an order issued by the Alberta government, Loam is owed $14,000, and he's not alone. A provincial database shows that Canopy owes more than $152,000 to workers. The company's founder and CEO, Ifeanyi Daniels Akunakwe, declined an interview with CBC. In a statement, he said Canopy failed to launch because of significant and unexpected banking challenges. This is not the first time one of Daniels Akunakwe's businesses has left people in the lurch.
No insulation, no drywall, nothing. It's just like this.
In 2023, his home building business, 3 Evolution, saddled people in Edmonton with mortgages on unfinished builds, and workers are seeking more than $80,000 in unpaid wages. Daniels Akunakwe says he's not in a position to provide a comment at this time concerning 3 Evolution. Some former employees wonder how he was able to launch one failed venture after another. Sarah Coder is an employment lawyer in Calgary.
The government's not going to stop a private citizen from incorporating a company just because they've had a string of failed businesses.
Alberta's Ministry overseeing jobs says it only has the power to regulate conditions of employment, not a person's broader business activities. Ethel Musa, CBC News, Toronto.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. If you're looking for tools to talk about the day's big stories with the little people in your life, check out cbckidsnews.ca. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Good morning, Manitoba. Thanks for joining us. Another icy morning out there. Thanks for being with us on Information Radio. You're on CBC, 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This hour on the program, it is post-holidays. You might be looking for something to do with the family. Maybe you're looking for something economical to do as well. A Winnipeg film group is once again hosting Cabin Fever every Sunday. We'll hear more about the movies they're showing and how you can take part if you want to go there. In addition, this week, the U.S. reduced the list of recommended childhood vaccines. We're going to talk to an infectious disease expert on this side of the border from the Public Agency of Canada about the concerns that prompts here in our country because of the changes being right next door. And then Scott Regerer has not been on morning sports lately. That's because he's prepping for the Olympic Games next month. And today he has a special report on Canada's women's hockey team that is getting set to defend gold. So we'll talk to Scott just before 7. Right now, Megan Ketchison is in for Heather Wells with Manitoba Headlines.
Good morning. Well, new details are emerging about a former Winnipeg police officer on trial for drug trafficking. CBC spoke to a woman who knew Elston Bostock when he was a constable with the Winnipeg Police Service. CBC News isn't identifying the woman due to her fear of reprisals. She says Bostock was known among his friends for always having a ready supply of drugs. Bostock pleaded guilty last fall to a number of crimes. And drums, singing, and words of support echoed through Memorial Park as people in Winnipeg came together for Pimachikamak Cree Nation. Hundreds of homes in the northern community won't be habitable for weeks, perhaps months, after a prolonged hydro outage led to frozen pipes and flooding. And we'll hear what people were saying coming up at 6:30.
All right. Thanks very much, Megan.
Thank you.
Let's get into the forecast. Abby Adeyemi, how are we ending the week here?
Well, we're going to be losing those mild conditions for sure today in Winnipeg because I see the temperature already jumping from the -4s and -5s or getting to -15 this morning. So it's going to be definitely a chilly start across board. I see, snow moving into a lot of the areas down south today. So things are going to cool up for the weekend as you prepare for your weekend, prepare for that. Up north, we're still dealing with those extreme wind chills in the valleys of -30s and -35s. Winnipeg right now, you will wake up to ice crystals on your vehicle, so you might give yourself some time to scrub this morning with just those light winds. Temperatures hovering between -15 and -12 all through the morning for the city before we get to the high of about -8 later in the day. And similar conditions we're seeing in the south, -7s to -22s, while up north we're seeing temperatures near -23. With a wind chill, it will hit -40 in the northern parts of the province today. But for Winnipeg right now, -15 with ice crystals.
Yeah, it's going to be weird this weekend. Saturday's super cold, as you were saying, compared to what we've had especially. And then Sunday, swings back up to 0.
I'll take it,
What's
Marcy.
that about?
It's January, remember. This is just to give us that, little room for what to expect in February.
Such a wild back and forth. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Corey Funk is in studio now with our morning commute. Anything up?
Yeah, no, very quiet commute overall so far. I haven't heard any major issues yet.
Yesterday, then I'll take a second to share, there were major issues. So in the morning when these speaking of the temperature swinging back and forth and when it's mild, it iced over.
Yep.
And I know that even now, when you're walking, right, you can feel that on the snow. It's it's really iced over.
Mm-hmm.
But some of the stories coming out of yesterday were crazy. So here's the one that I heard, and let this give us all caution heading into these days, because it feels like you're not going to slide, and it feels not bad. In the afternoon, certainly, it did turn a bit more slushy and wet, right? It was amazing, actually. But in the morning, I heard this story firsthand from a person in my life who was on McPhillips, and they were at a light, so they were stopped. So you're boxed in, you're stopped, and the boulevard's beside you. Well, coming toward them was a garbage truck on the other side. The garbage truck, heavy, big, right? It lost control because of, not going so fast. It just started to slide because people weren't realizing, I think, how slick it was. Anyway, the garbage truck starts sliding, hits the boulevard dead on in a way that it starts to teeter.
Oh, man.
So now this person is facing one side of the boulevard and the garbage truck is teetering and could fall right onto them. And this person said, I actually thought that's, this is my moment. This is my moment. I'm going to be crushed here because couldn't move the car out of the way.
Terrifying.
The truck goes bang, 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 falls back the right way, down on its 4 wheels, doesn't tip over. Yeah. Driver of the garbage truck gets out, and then the person driving the vehicle, and they have this exchange, looking at each other, realizing what a close call that was.
Terrifying.
Yeah. Terrifying. And say to each other, are you okay?
That's one of those moments in hindsight that puts everything in perspective for you, right?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So I don't know. It was just such a story. It did exactly that to me. And maybe that's a good thing for all of us, just as a reminder, because it feels so great out there. It feels like spring, but holy moly. Yeah, we're still in winter driving mode here.
Certainly.
788-3093. If you need to reach Corey this morning with anything. And again, as he mentioned this morning, we're in better conditions and we so far don't have any problems to report. All right, let's turn our attention to a different aspect of winter here. Winters can be long, and after the holidays, people can feel tapped out as well. But if you're looking for something to do with your family, we have an idea to start the show. Winnipeg Film Group's offering their Cabin Fever free weekend films at Dave Barber's Cinematheque. That is where you can catch some old classic movies, and then you can relive some nostalgic moments by watching maybe some of your childhood favorites with your kids. It's all free, as I mentioned. Olivia Norquay is the film programmer over at Dave Barber Cinematheque and is with us via Zoom early. Hi there. How you doing?
Hi, how are you? Good
I'm
morning.
good. Good morning. So tell me what you're going to be showing this year. I love this idea.
Yeah, for sure. So for Cabin Fever this year, we are showing Lilo and Stitch this Sunday at 1 p.m. It's going to be introduced by Kevin McDonald, local comedian, as well as on January 18th, we're going to be showing James the Giant Peach. There's also a short film program that I'm really excited about on January 25th, which features experimental and animated short films from the Winnipeg Film Group catalog.
How long have you guys been doing Cabin Fever? When did it start?
It started in January of 2005.
Yeah. How successful is it? How much do families love this?
I think it's a really formative and special event that we put on. We are the only theater in the core in downtown, and I think that it's important to have free programming, especially in the city and especially in wintertime. And I think it's pretty special.
How are you able to support it given that it's free? And why have you valued it over at the Cinematheque to continue to offer this to families?
Yeah, for sure. So we're able to offer free programming with Cabin Fever thanks to Assiniboine Credit Union. They've been sponsoring the event since 2008.
And how do you decide what movies to play? Do you guys get around the table and go, okay, what were your childhood favorites, or how do you pick them?
I do the programming, and so I like to choose films that are either a little bit older or underseen, or films that I really loved seeing in the theater as a kid. Like I saw James the Giant Peach when it came out, and it was exciting and a little bit frightening. So I thought that would be a pretty cool choice.
And what kind of feedback do you get from people who come?
Yeah, it's people seem to really like it. There's been kids have been really excited and have given us suggestions for films that they'd want to see. There's a lot of moments. We played Pee-wee's Big Adventure last Sunday, and there's a lot of moments of kids and families saying the jokes before they were actually said in the film. So I think people are also coming to see not only films that they haven't seen before, but old favorites. And I think it's really important to just sort of foster a curiosity about films, but also going to see a film in a movie theater with your community.
Is there always an interactive portion? You mentioned that Kevin McDonald will be there for to intro one of these films as well. So is that always part of what you do with the families?
Every once in a while. I think it's just generally because of the audience, it's going to be interactive, which is pretty special. But yeah, we do try to have some guests introducing and giving more information or more context for the films.
How do people attend? Do they literally just show up like they would for the movie and it's free and there they are?
We do recommend, just because it is quite busy, we do recommend that people pre-register and get their seats. So they can visit davebarbercinematheque.com. If there are seats available, they're definitely welcome to walk up and get a spot, but we just can't guarantee a seat.
What does the rest of your season look like for programming this year?
Yeah, so starting in February, on February 1st, we're showing the 1959 version of Sleeping Beauty. I think it's such a beautiful example of animation. We're also showing A Bug's Life on February 8th. We're doing a collection of Max Fleischer cartoons. We do a special Valentine's Day program for that on February 15th. And then the last film is Wolfwalkers on February 22nd.
Thank you very much for being with us, Olivia. We know that it's treasured to have a theater like yours, in the middle of the Exchange, still doing this kind of unique programming, and it's really great that you do something for winter for families, especially with little kids, because I know this is specifically who that's geared at.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks for being up early too.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
That's Olivia Norquay with us live via Zoom this Friday morning. Film programmer over at Dave Barber Cinematheque at 100 Arthur Street. It's very cool to watch a movie in there, by the way. If you've never been to that theater, you should check it out. Their programming starts at 1 o'clock every Sunday for the month of January and February. Those are for the free shows that we're talking about. But you should register first just to make sure you get a spot, right? So online, you're going to Dave Barber, BARBER, DaveBarberCinematheque.com. All one word.
Are you responsible for the life of a tiny human? It's a lot, we know. Try a more zen approach with CBC Gem. It has your little one's best friends like Peppa Pig, Paw Patrol, Daniel Tiger, Dino Ranch, and more. Our shows are calm, fun, and educational. Best of all, it's totally free, and kids watch without any ads. Watch free on CBC Gem. And exhale.
It is minus 15, some ice crystals out there in Winnipeg. It's clear in Brandon, minus 17. Thompson's mostly cloudy, also though minus 17. Well, let's talk about vaccinations. This week, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention changed their routine vaccine schedule for children. They reduced the number of recommended shots for kids to 11, and in some cases lowered the recommended doses. So childhood vaccination rates have been declining in Canada as well in recent years, and now the changes to the vaccine schedule in the States are raising some concerns here on our side of the border. Dr. Marina Salvadori is here to outline that. She's a pediatrician and infectious diseases specialist with the Public Health Agency of Canada. She's also a professor in the Division of Pediatric Infectious Diseases at McGill University. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks very much for having me.
So what are your concerns about how the changes to the U.S. vaccine recommendations could impact the health of Canadians?
Well, I think that most Canadians right now are looking south of the border and really realizing that we're in a very unique and unusual time of history. And I think that most Canadians are retaining faith in our own Canadian structures and processes. But there is always the chance that the United States can have outbreaks of vaccine-preventable diseases, and these can be moved north of the border. And so we have to be very vigilant if there's any outbreaks of diseases. And our best protection is making sure that our population is up to date with their vaccines.
And how do these new U.S. recommendations compare with current Canadian recommendations?
Well, all countries have slightly different recommendations, and that's because the diseases are not homogeneous and the same across every country. As you can imagine, Canada is a large country, and the incidence and the burden of disease is different in different parts of the country. And it also depends if you have a universal healthcare system so that people have easy access to care and have had appropriate screening. And countries also look at what we call cost effectiveness, or is this a good use of the taxpayers' money? So every country, including all developed countries, look at the scientific data and all of these other factors and make vaccine schedules and recommendations that are in the best interest of their own country. So all of us have slightly different schedules, but they're well thought through and they're tailored to be the best that we can deliver to our own people.
In terms of the actual process for that, how does the process for determining those recommendations you mentioned for vaccines work in Canada?
We have a very robust process in Canada. First, a vaccine goes to Health Canada, where they look at, does this prevent the disease that it's supposed to? Are there any safety signals at all? And is it manufactured according to best practices? Then it goes to the National Advisory Committee for Immunization, which is part of the Public Health Agency of Canada. And this is a committee, a large committee that it has people from across the country in all different roles with different perspectives. So pediatricians, doctors, internists, geriatricians, pharmacists, nurses, and they look at all the scientific data as well as the cost and all the factors that are unique to Canada and make a recommendation of how best to implement this on a wide scale in Canada. And then those recommendations go to your individual province, and your province looks at it and decides what is best for our province, considering the burden of illness here as well as what we can afford, and how best to make sure that it's delivered, across the diversity of their population. So we have a very robust system in Canada, and I think that we continue to be considered a gold standard across the world. Our National Advisory Committee for Immunization has been in place for more than 60 years, and we are very highly regarded internationally.
Recently, Federal Health Minister Marjorie Michel said that U.S. health and science institutions can no longer be depended upon as a reliable partner. What kind of support did we get here and rely on from our U.S. counterparts?
Well, Canada's immunization decisions are independent and robust. However, we always work with all of our international partners across the world, including across Europe, the UK, Germany, across Australia, New Zealand, and the World Health Organization. We very carefully look at any scientific data that comes out, as well as decisions made by other countries that are different, because we want to course correct if there are new insights or new thoughts. But we have partners around the world that we work together with all the time. The CDC has always been a strong and valued partner, and we continue to work with some of the independent scientists and the individuals at CDC. But our own decisions are always with a Canadian lens and in the best interests of the children of Canada.
So it's interesting because we're talking about this on two levels, right? There's the impact the states could have on us on that federal partnership level, and then there's like the practical level of how diseases spread. We're right next door. But then there's also attitudes. So what's your message for parents when it comes to childhood vaccines and where they should seek advice?
So parents in Canada, if they have questions, should talk to their family doctor, nurse practitioner, primary health provider, pediatrician. And if you don't have any of those resources, your local public health network, your local public health unit will know a lot and be able to answer your questions. I think Canadian parents should know that all decisions made on the vaccine schedule in Canada are made with the child at the center. We make decisions that offer Canadian children the best shot at a healthy and long life.
All right, Dr. Salvadori, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks very much for having me.
It's live with us on CBC, Dr. Marina Salvadori. She's a pediatrician and infectious diseases specialist with the Public Health Agency of Canada. Well, it's Friday morning, and it is coming up to news time at 6:30 with Megan Ketchison, so we'll get the very latest of news in Manitoba. But how about a laugh before the weekend? This one comes from comedian Ronald Hay, who is a high school teacher. He did a set to a CBC audience in Owen Sound, talking about how he enjoys teaching the next generation.
I'm a high school teacher, actually, so yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I want to kill myself. I'm a high school accounting teacher, actually, so yeah, I know. Just living the Asian dream, my friends. And I know what you guys are thinking. You guys are probably looking at me thinking, Asian? Accounting? I bet you this guy also coaches the school's badminton team. And I do coach the school's badminton team, yeah. It's the greatest. It's the best. Seriously, if the school would just let me run the math and ping pong club now, I'll never retire from the place, so. Oh, it's a good job. It's a really, really good job. I like teaching accounting. One of my favorite projects with the kids, actually, is just a fun game of Monopoly, right? I don't know if you've taken accounting before. You get to play the game. You get to record your transactions. And it's fun as a teacher to see kids love learning, right? Like, they're yelling at each other. They're yelling at me. They're getting so into it. They're like, sir, I ran out of money. I can't pay rent. And I'm like, Jimmy, you are getting a 55 in this course. You better get used to saying that phrase.
That is Ronald Hay. He is one of the comedians that performed at the Roxy Theatre in Owen Sound, Ontario this fall. He will also be featured on Laugh Out Loud. If you need a laugh this Friday, you can catch it right here on CBC Radio 1 at 1:30 or Saturdays at 6:30 on 89.3 FM. They've also got a podcast. Still ahead, speaking of money, we have the business news coming up. Companies are bracing for a Supreme Court ruling on the legality of U.S. President Donald Trump's sweeping global tariffs. So we'll get into that with Kristalee Ramlakan after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Megan Ketchison in Winnipeg at 6:30. Cloudy skies, minus 15, a mix of sun and cloud today. We could see some snow later on and a high of minus 8. We're learning more details about a former Winnipeg police officer on trial for drug trafficking. CBC spoke to a woman who knew Elston Bostock when he was a constable with the Winnipeg Police Service. We're not identifying her due to her fear of reprisals for speaking out. She says Bostock could always be counted on at parties to get friends high and seemed to relish in his dual identity as a police officer and a drug supplier.
Knowing he was dealing and handing out drugs from his pocket, it just felt like, hey, so how far could he go in terms of illegal activities while being a police officer?
Bostock pleaded guilty this week to drug trafficking and adding to a rap sheet that includes guilty pleas on corruption charges, including leaking police information and conspiring with officers to get friends out of tickets. Drums, singing, and words of support echoed through Memorial Park as people in Winnipeg came together for Pimicikamak Cree Nation. Hundreds of homes in the northern community won't be habitable for weeks or perhaps months after prolonged hydro outages led to frozen pipes and flooding. Paige Papanikis was one of the dozens gathered at the round dance in front of the legislature yesterday. She hopes people in the city will step up to help displaced residents.
We need donations of clothing, shampoo, toiletries, anything you can think of, activity games, board games, crossword puzzles, things to keep our people busy.
More help is on the way for the people of Pimicikamak. The First Nation says additional heaters are expected to arrive Monday, and 30 more tradespeople are set to follow suit. In international news, Minnesota's governor is calling for a moment of silence this morning in memory of Renee Good. The 37-year-old Minneapolis mother was shot Wednesday by an ICE agent. As Katie Nicholson reports, thousands were there in cities across the U.S. to continue to march on anti-ICE protests, calling for the immigrant enforcement surge to end.
The searing anger burned through the cold, wet air. For the second night in a row, thousands walked through the streets of Minneapolis, demanding ICE withdraw after one of its agents shot and killed a 37-year-old mother, Renee Good.
They're threatening and terrorizing our communities, not just immigrants now, but U.S. citizens.
Carrie McCormick has been out both nights to show her support. She says Good's death is a turning point.
I think that was a defining moment because it crossed the line.
Hundreds have visited the growing memorial to Good on the side of the road where she was killed. This morning, Governor Tim Walz has called on the state to honor her.
I'd ask everyone to pause for a moment of silence, to remember Renee Good, also to remember all that's good and right about this nation.
Thousands of others will take to the streets and march again. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Minneapolis.
And in Portland, Oregon, 2 people were shot Thursday by U.S. federal officers. The pair, a man and a woman, are in hospital, and some Portlanders are upset. Here's what one told KGW Television.
I am beyond angry that this is happening the day after they killed that woman. I mean, this has gone too far.
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem alleges the victims were Venezuelans and part of the Tren de Agua gang, but so far there has been no proof. Carvers are building a winter wonderland in Clear Lake. They're putting the finishing touches on a giant snow pavilion nestled in the heart of Wasagaming. The snow fort, dubbed the Clarso Snow Pavilion, is named after Elkhorn Resort's Nordic Spa. Parker Buckley is the resort's strategic projects manager. He says the entire community is working together to encourage winter tourism.
We've all come together to try and really center our efforts on making Clear Lake a winter destination. And this is representative of that as we try and bring in winter visitors from afar.
Buckley says they want Clear Lake to become an international tourist destination. The pavilion opens this weekend and will be a feature of the Frost and Fire Festival in March. And despite a great start, it was not a great night for the Winnipeg Jets last night. They took on the Edmonton Oilers and hoped to snap a 10-game losing skid, but they did take the lead early in the game.
It comes to Morrissey, the shot trickled in front, and they score! Rolled over the goal!
That's the Jets on TSN. The Oilers did come back to win 4-3. The Jets have now lost 11 games in a row. And that's the CBC News from Winnipeg. You can always find more on our website at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Yeah, we'll see how tonight goes. All right, thanks, Meeks.
You're welcome.
There's really not much more to say. Well, let's get into what's going on in the regional forecast and hand it to Abby.
Yeah, we're looking for a mix of sun and clouds today. That would give way to the snow system coming into the southern part of the province, along with breezy conditions as we see that moves through the province. For Winnipeg right now, minus 15. We have ice crystals outside. We'll see the temperature hover between minus 15 and minus 12. So you might notice the temperature just dance between minus 15 and minus 12 before we get to a high of minus 8 today before the afternoon snow kicks in. And then tonight we'd see about 4 centimeters of snow come our way. Some gusty winds expected to come with that also before the snow ends tomorrow morning. For the Pembina Valley region, Modern Winkler, Alton and Morris down to the U.S. border, similar conditions we're seeing, but temperatures around minus 7 at this time. Also having ice crystals there, warming up to minus 7. Some gusty west winds also expected in that part of the province. Now we track it west towards Brandon and all the way towards Nipawin. We're seeing some clear skies in that part of the province, minus 17 at this time. You climb to minus 8 by the afternoon period, expecting some snow also in that part of the province. The wind chill gets close to minus 30 overnight for folks in the Westman region. In the Parkland region, we're looking at cloudy conditions, minus 22 at this time. Snow arrives during your lunch break. We'll see highs around minus 11, though the wind chill makes it feel like minus 30 this morning. For folks around the Interlake region, it's minus 11 around Gimli at this time. Cloudy there also. You warm up to minus 8 later. Expect the snow to arrive sometime in the afternoon. For folks in the powerful influence surrounding communities, we're looking at minus 10s, minus 9s, depending on where you are in that area. You get to stay around this temperature for most of the day before you dip to minus 23 later tonight. And then for folks in Thompson, we're seeing a light snow falling there already. Minus 17 at this time. You warm up to minus 14. For Tuduli Lake, minus 27. It is clear out there. Slim chance of snow. You warm up to minus 19. And then Churchill, we're looking at ice crystals in that part of the province. Minus 23 at this time. And we only see the temperature fall all through the day. So it's more like snow on its way, and it's going to touch everybody today.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Corey Funk, the commute.
Yes, so far quiet, but there's one thing to keep an eye out for. We just got a call from Mandeep on the commuter line. She said westbound Wellington at Barrie, so heading towards the airport there. There's a collision that's blocking the right lane, so keep left to get around that. If you do see anything else going on there, give me a call on the CBC commuter line if you're walking your bike and you're driving. We'd love to get an update on the river trail or any other road or highway you're seeing out there. That number, 204-788-3093.
All right. Thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
Business News Time. Crystal Ramlakan's here via Zoom. Hello. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Marcy.
So companies are bracing right now for a Supreme Court ruling on the legality of U.S. President Donald Trump's global tariffs. Can you break this down for us?
Yeah, so the court is expected to issue rulings today, but as is customary, has not said what case or cases will be acted upon. But still, there is anticipation that the court will strike down tariffs imposed by Trump after judges voiced skepticism about whether he has the authority to levy those duties. So that means tariffs imposed on Canada would be eliminated. Now, most goods traded between the two countries are compliant with the Canada-US-Mexico Agreement, or CUSMA, so a change would mainly benefit sectors not covered under that protection, such as steel and aluminum. And it could also be a messy battle for businesses over possibly getting back about $150 billion in refunds from the U.S. government for duties paid by importers. Now, some companies anticipate that even if the court invalidates the tariffs, the president will not make it easy for them to get their money back. And Trump is the first president to invoke the International Emergency Economic Powers Act to impose tariffs, and the law historically has been used for imposing sanctions on U.S. adversaries or freezing their assets.
Let's stay with trade here for a moment. Since Trump's tariffs, Canada's exports to the U.S. we know are slowing down. What's the latest on that?
Yeah, so exports to the U.S. in October accounted for about 2/3 of all exports, but that's actually the lowest non-pandemic level since the current method of data calculation was established in 1997. So exports to non-U.S. nations jumped to a record high, pushed up by shipments of things like gold to Britain and oil to China. And meanwhile, imports to Canada increased, so imports actually outpaced exports. And some analysts say Canada is becoming more attractive to the rest of the world as it tries to diversify trade away from the U.S. Canada is seeing a rapid increase in imports for products that historically were going to the U.S. And as a result of all this, Canada's trade surplus with our neighbor fell to almost $5 billion from over $8 billion in September.
And finally, FIFA has chosen a video content partner for their World Cup this year. Who is it?
Yeah, so this is TikTok. So TikTok has been picked as the first preferred platform for video content on social media by the soccer body. Digital creators will get special access at the tournament being co-hosted in 16 cities, including 2 here in Canada this June and July. Broadcast rights holders can live stream parts of the games at a dedicated hub on the TikTok app. And FIFA says a wide group of creators will get the opportunity to use and co-create archival footage for FIFA. But, the soccer body has not said the value of the deal or the details of any tender process or rival bidders. YouTube did have a low-level sponsor deal at the 2022 World Cup, but seems like it's TikTok all the way this time. And, the social media platform became the world's most downloaded phone app while also under threat of being shut down in the U.S. because of concerns over national security. But last month, TikTok's China-based parent company ByteDance agreed to form a U.S. joint venture with investors Oracle, Silver Lake, and MGX. And that deal is scheduled to be finalized later this month.
All right, Crystal, have a great weekend. Thank you.
Thanks, Marcy. You too.
Crystal Round-the-Count joins us every morning here on our show with business news. Well, back to other news. In the top news in the United States being covered, one of the stories, that is, the shooting death of the 37-year-old woman in Minneapolis by ICE agents. It's once again reopened divisions within the American society. Among the two camps, one is crying murder, the other domestic terrorism. Robert Spiel is a lecturer over at Toronto Metropolitan University. He's an associate professor of political science at Penn State University as well. He spoke with the CBC's David Common about how the two groups can see the same circumstance and come to such different conclusions, and also about what all of this means for Minneapolis.
Americans are divided and see everything through a political lens. So when an incident or a major controversy happens, people see it through an ideological perspective and through their pre-existing ideas. The Trump administration, including the president himself, were claiming that it was an act of domestic terrorism, and that she almost ran the ICE officer over, but at least from the video we've seen so far, none of that happened. I mean, none of the officers came close to being run over, and the woman does not appear to have tried to engage in domestic terrorism. What we don't know yet is what was happening before the video we saw, whether she was interfering with a law enforcement action, although that still does not necessarily excuse the idea of shooting her. I think one of the things that interests me about this is what the reaction will be among the hardcore Trump supporters, the people called MAGA. A lot of them don't necessarily trust authority and don't always trust police authority. And while they are generally prefer enforcement actions to limit illegal immigration in the United States, they may not also like police officers shooting at a woman who didn't seem to be doing anything particularly dangerous. And it could perhaps cause some dissension within the Trump supporting ranks.
It is striking to many that this incident happened really just blocks away from where George Floyd was killed. And in the aftermath of his death, there were huge protests. And in the aftermath of this shooting death, there were some protests last night. And yet we also then saw Minnesota's governor, Tim Walz, come out and say two protesters don't take the bait. He is arguing that the president would love nothing more than to deploy federal troops and invoke the Insurrection Act. Do you see that as a risk?
I think it's a risk if there were mass protests in Minneapolis that Trump could use that as an excuse to send more law enforcement to Minneapolis. I suspect, though, that due to the lack of racial overtones in this incident, it was not, a white police officer killing an African-American civilian. I suspect that the types of protests will be different in nature and perhaps not as extensive as they were after George Floyd, who represented a long history in the United States of police officers attacking black men. So my best guess right now is we won't see the same level of protesting this year that we saw in 2020. But I don't know. And Tim Walz, the governor, is probably correct in trying to encourage protesters not to bait Donald Trump because that could perhaps make the situation worse.
So that echoes a bit of what we heard from a man we interviewed yesterday live on our show who lives in St. Paul, who was talking about his feelings moving forward for the future of his city, future Minneapolis, of course, St. Paul right there. But that is Robert Spiel, a lecturer at Toronto Metropolitan University, in conversation with CBC's David Common. He's an associate professor of political science over at Penn State University. As you heard, Minnesota's governor and commissioner of public safety have been urging anyone demonstrating to do so peacefully. And if you're just waking up and just plugging in, and if you missed yesterday, there's more demonstrations now in another city. In Portland, Oregon, 2 people were shot by federal agents. This transpiring yesterday, developing, and we'll hear the very latest coming up on that on World Report. It's 13 minutes now to 7 o'clock. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for joining us. Friday morning, ice crystals in our city this morning in Winnipeg. And be careful underfoot and take it easy on the drive. You could come to some slippery sections. Not quite as bad as yesterday, I don't think. But today it will be colder, a high of -8. And we do have periods of snow on the way in our forecast. Well, a bit of music now from Leaf Rapids. This is Starling to a Starling. Lovely new music from Winnipeg folk duo Leaf Rapids, Starling to a Starling. That's from their newest album, Velvet Paintings. It is 9 minutes now to 7 o'clock, and today we're going to learn the roster for Canada's Olympic women's hockey team, trying to defend the gold medal they won at the last games in Beijing. Scott Regier of CBC Sports is here to look at their chances and Canadian hockey fortunes as a whole when they go to Italy. Good morning.
Hey there, Marcy.
So what do you think of Canada's women's roster? What do you think it's going to look like today?
Well, the core is likely to look a lot like the one we saw in Beijing. Marie-Philippe Poulin, Natalie Spooner, Brianne Jenner, they should all be among the forwards that are named today. That said, Marcy, they're all in their mid-30s now, so this will probably be their Olympic swan song. Meanwhile, on defense, we could see a changing of the guard. At 37, Jocelyn Larocque is the country's oldest candidate for these games, and CBC asked Jocelyn how she's preparing for today's announcement.
If we want gold, we need all of these decisions to be hard, and that every day I just try to prove that I should be on this team in the ways that I can. To be able to do something I love for so long, it would mean the world.
Larocque's chief competition today is Canada's youngest player. That's Chloe Primorano. She's still a teenager. Primorano was only 4 years old when Larocque made her Olympic debut. Primorano and Larocque were actually paired together at last year's World Championships, where they became good friends, so that kinship could be tested today should one or the other not make the cut. My guess is Primorano will get the nod. Remember, she's the first female skater ever drafted in the CHL. That was by the Vancouver Giants.
Well, we will be cheering unabashedly sorry to Primorano, but
Jocelyn.
for Larocque, as she's from St. Anne, Manitoba, of course.
Right.
How confident are you that Canada can win gold again?
Well, I'm very confident Canada will have a chance to play for gold. The Canadians, after all, have made the championship contest of every Olympics to date. But I would say I'm cautiously optimistic, Marcy, that Canada will prevail with the title in Italy. In the recent rivalry series, we saw the U.S. sweep Canada 4-0, outscoring them 24-7 in the process, so the Americans are the favorites. Part of the issue here is the establishment of the Professional Women's Hockey League. Before the PWHL was around, Hockey Canada used to bring the women's national team together for 6 months at a centralized camp in Calgary. That provided extensive preparation and bonding that just isn't possible anymore. Indeed, many of the Canadians are just as familiar with the Americans they play alongside doing their day jobs now. One thing's for sure, Marcy, with the world's top female players finally having a league to call their own, the quality of play we see at these Olympics should be higher than anything we've seen before.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. Meantime, let's look at the men. The Canadian men's roster announced last week. What do you make of their chances in Italy?
Well, it's hard to argue with a team whose top 3 centermen are Connor McDavid, Nathan McKinnon, and Sidney Crosby. While goalies are crucial, you can make an argument that center is the game's most important position, being central to every play, linking defense and offense while covering most of the ice. Now, it doesn't hurt that Canada's centermen are extra motivated heading into these games, since the NHL hasn't participated at an Olympics in a dozen years. Just listen to McDavid.
You just get the feeling of being part of something that's bigger than just your club team, just being part of the Oilers or Pittsburgh or Florida, It's so much bigger than that. It unites the country. You talk about Sid's goal, talk about the Four Nations and stuff like that. That kind of feeling and playing hockey at the absolute highest level. That's what ultimately everybody wants, is sport at the highest level, and that's what the Olympics is all about, and that's what we're looking forward to being a part of.
And I'm sure McDavid's also looking forward to a potential gold medal showdown with the U.S., with Russia banned from these games and other traditional European powers like Sweden, Finland, and Czechia not looking as strong these days. It's shaping up as another standoff between North American nations for the gold, a standoff I'm sure Jets forward Mark Scheifele would love to have been part of as well, but of course he was one of the notable snubs this time around.
Didn't happen. Nope. You talked about goaltending, Scott, so that's a perceived area actually of weakness on our Team Canada. How fair do you think that assessment is, though, for the men's team?
I think on paper it's very fair. Look at the U.S. They have Connor Hellebuck, Jake Ottinger, and Jeremy Swayman to choose from. Any of those guys could be Canada's number one if they had the appropriate citizenship. Meanwhile, the Canadian goaltending trio headed to the Olympics is headlined by Jordan Binnington. Binnington right now is ranked by the analytics firm MoneyPuck.com as the second worst keeper in the NHL, and that's among 84 goalies who qualified. Team Canada General Manager Doug Armstrong was asked how he justifies naming Binnington to the roster.
When we select all the players, we look at their recent play and we look at their resume. And Jordan Binnington's resume speaks for itself. What he did at the Four Nations, what he's done in the NHL. His statistical numbers aren't to where he would like them to be this year. But I think talking to the coaches and the management, and that was the one thing that surprised me a little bit with the group, was his name never came up as a question mark.
Armstrong clearly favors goalies who stand out when the stakes are highest, and Binnington does have both a Stanley Cup and a Four Nations face-off triumph to his name. So on paper, Marcy, the U.S. may have the advantage, but on the ice, it just might belong to Canada. And if Binnington does falter, Logan Thompson's waiting in the wings, and MoneyPuck.com says Thompson, statistically at least, is the second best keeper in the NHL right now.
Before you go, there's been a lot of talk in the lead up to these games about the main Olympic arena not being ready. So where are things standing right now?
Well, for our listeners, I encourage you to look at our CBC Sports website. There are recent pictures of the dressing rooms, if you wanted to call them that, and that'll give you a bit of a window into the state of readiness. This facility is going to be small on a couple of fronts. It'll seat only about 11,000 people. The surface, the ice surface, will be 3 feet shorter than normal. There's also concern about the quality of the ice with all of the games being scheduled, whether it'll be safe enough. If not, Hockey Canada head Catherine Henderson was asked, what happens?
Whatever you think is going to happen at an Olympic Games, it never happens exactly the way you think it's going to unfold. There's never a plan B. There's plan B, C, D, E, F, and you're just constantly looking at things. This week, we'll be going over to Milan to watch the test event, to look at what the facilities look like, and start to create those plan A through Z, I guess.
For its part, Marcy, the NHL says it's not going to send its players if the ice is deemed unsuitable. The league and its billionaire owners don't want to risk injuries to their star players. A contingency could see Canadians who are currently playing in European leagues suit up for Canada instead. As for the women's tournament, that's a different matter. The PWHL owns all of its teams and knows the Olympics, inferior ice or not, is a rare showcase for its talent. So stay tuned. There's a test event starting later today to see whether the Santa Giulia Arena and the secondary row facility are fit for competition. And if not, well, let the contingencies commence.
All right, Scott, thanks for the report.
You betcha.
That is Scott Regehr teeing up the Olympic hockey situation for us. The women's roster being announced later today. It's 2 minutes to 7 o'clock, still ahead.
A lot of hate is motivated by a sense of belonging or a lack of belonging.
We're going to talk to British Columbia's Human Rights Commissioner about a 2023 report analyzing hate, unique of its kind, and that is because of multiple local communities facing anti-Semitic and racist messages in our community in the past week. So stay tuned. That's ahead. Also ahead, we're going to talk to Frosty Face MB about what we should do outside in the winter. He's got some good ideas. Right now, Megan Ketchison with headlines.
Well, people in Winnipeg raised their voices in solidarity with the residents of Pimicikamak Cree Nation yesterday in front of the ledge. We'll hear from them, and we'll hear who is planning on running as the Conservative candidate for Steinbach now that MLA Kelvin Gertsen announced he's not seeking the renomination.
It's been years since someone else could run, right?
Right.
People would run there, but I mean, he's won for so long. That'd be
Exactly.
interesting. All right, thanks, Megan.
You bet.
Ice crystals in Winnipeg, it's minus 15. Our high today, minus 8. There will be periods of snow in Winnipeg. Your drive is going to be a little bit icy. Could be an issue around Wellington. So stay tuned.
On The Current.
America's largest buffet, Shady Maple in Pennsylvania, serves about 1.2 million people a year.
There are chefs across Canada who are choosing to cook for fewer people, opening micro restaurants that sit only a few dozen customers. We'll speak with 3 foodies about the appeal of having a place to experiment, serve up the unexpected, and talk to strangers coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on CBC Listen.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm John Northcott. Iran's supreme leader is telling Donald Trump to focus on problems at home and leave Iran alone. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei makes the remarks in a televised speech as anti-government protests spread to more than 100 cities and towns. He's accusing demonstrators of, quote, ruining their own streets to play up to the U.S. Crystal Gamansing has more.
With buildings and cars set alight in the capital, Tehran, anti-regime chants ring out. Actions, according to Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, of rioters wanting to please U.S. President Donald Trump. After a 12th straight night of demonstrations across the country, Khamenei appeared on state television this morning, warning the Islamic Republic will not tolerate mercenaries for foreigners. The U.S. president has repeatedly threatened to intervene militarily if Iranian authorities kill protesters. The demonstrations began late December with frustrations over Iran's failing economy. Shop owners in Tehran's Grand Bazaar taking to the streets. Security forces quickly tried to quash the demonstrations, but they've continued, growing in size and spreading to other cities. With internet access nearly shut down, reaching people in Tehran and getting a clear sense of those killed or injured is difficult. Human rights groups estimate 40 people have died. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance said Thursday the regime has many problems.
I'll let the president speak to what we're going to do in the future, but we certainly stand with anybody across the world, including the Iranian people who are advocating for their rights.
The son of Iran's late ruling Shah, Reza Pahlavi, is encouraging people to keep going to the streets, posting to social media, "The eyes of the world are upon you." He's living in exile in the U.S. Many protesters are calling on him to come home. Crystal Gamansing, CBC News, London.
Donald Trump says he's canceling a second wave of attacks on Venezuela, saying it won't be needed. This as Venezuela has begun releasing political prisoners.
Que es materialmente imposible.
One of those freed is opposition figure Enrique Marquez, who ran in the 2024 presidential election, an election widely denounced as fraudulent. It's still unclear how many detainees are being released, but human rights groups estimate 800 to 900 political prisoners remain. The head of Venezuela's National Assembly, Jorge Rodriguez, calls the move a gesture to, quote, consolidate peace. Another night of outrage directed at U.S. immigration agents with a new incident focusing protesters' anger. 2 people shot and injured by Border Patrol agents yesterday in Portland. Oregon Governor Tina Kotek.
My message to the federal government is this: we demand transparency. We demand your cooperation with Portland Police because we need to investigate this incident.
There were anti-ICE rallies overnight in Los Angeles, Washington, and continuing in Minneapolis, where Renee Good was killed on Wednesday. As Katie Nicholson reports, thousands of people in that city are demanding the immigration raids end.
The searing anger burned through the cold, wet air. For the second night in a row, thousands walked through the streets of Minneapolis, demanding ICE withdraw after one of its agents shot and killed a 37-year-old mother, Renee Good.
They're threatening and terrorizing our communities, not just immigrants now, but U.S. citizens.
Carrie McCormick has been out both nights to show her support. She says Good's death is a turning point.
That was a defining moment because it crossed the line from people just being frightened to someone actually being killed.
Hundreds have visited the growing memorial to Good on the side of the road where she was killed. Governor Tim Walz has called on the state to honor her.
I'd ask everyone to pause for a moment of silence, to remember Renee Good, also to remember all that's good and right about this nation.
Protests are expected to continue, though deep down, McCormick doesn't think they'll convince the Trump administration to wind down its ICE operation in the state.
I think they're going to do whatever they want. They have a huge budget and a lot of resources and plenty of people who want to go out and bust heads, and they'll keep going. But I can't rest. I can't sit with it.
And so she and thousands of others will take to the streets and march again. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Minneapolis.
Canada, along with nations around the world, anxiously awaiting for a possible ruling from the U.S. Supreme Court today. The court could decide on the legality of President Donald Trump's global tariffs. Willie Lowry is in our Washington bureau. Willie, what could it mean if the court strikes down the tariffs?
U.S. President Donald Trump has called it the most important ruling in the country's history. That's in part because he staked his economic agenda on tariffs. Back in November, when the Supreme Court heard the case, justices grilled government lawyers, challenging them on why they thought the president had the right to use the International Emergency Powers Act as justification for imposing tariffs. That hearing led many companies to believe that the country's highest court could end up ruling against the Trump administration. Now, more than 1,000 companies are suing the government to get back the approximately $150 billion that they've already spent on tariffs. And that could have huge financial implications. Of course, if the court rules in favor of the government, that's a non-factor.
Well, Willie, if it does come today, this decision, how much could it affect Canada?
Not as much as Canadians might hope. First, most Canadian goods are still protected from tariffs under the Canada-US-Mexico trade agreement. And the tariffs that have hit hardest on steel, aluminum, and lumber, those were applied using a different legal justification, which is not under consideration from the court. Regardless of the Supreme Court's decision, the Trump administration has made clear it will continue to use tariffs. They'll just search for another justification.
Willie Lowry, DNR Washington Bureau. Thanks, Willie.
My pleasure.
Russia says it's fired one of its Oreshnik hypersonic missiles at Ukraine for a second time. Moscow claims the strike was in retaliation for a Ukrainian drone attack on one of Vladimir Putin's residences last month, an allegation Kyiv flatly denies. Russian officials say the missile hit energy infrastructure and a drone-making facility in western Ukraine. Meanwhile, Ukraine's capital, Kyiv, was hit overnight by a wave of Russian drones. 4 people are dead and critical infrastructure damaged. Around 6,000 residents spent the night without power. And finally, a European satellite company is pitching the Canadian military on a plan to provide secure satellite broadband as an alternative to providers like the Elon Musk-owned Starlink. Eutelsat, largely owned by the French and UK governments, says its system could give Canada full control over its northern communications. The CBC's Murray Brewster has the details on this $250 million proposal.
The French president is actively engaged and trying to keep it as a floating agenda item with the Prime Minister.
David Van Dyke of Eutelsat Canada, who's peeling back the curtain on the high-level maneuvers of the last few months. Eutelsat has a constellation of low Earth orbiting satellites that provide broadband access and secure communications in places like the Arctic.
So what we can provide for Canada is what we call a sovereign capacity capability, where Canada would actually own all of our capacity in the far north.
The key here is sovereign capability. Eutelsat is offering to create specific, dedicated, secure links for the Canadian military, independent of U.S. providers, such as Elon Musk and Starlink.
And we also give them the ability to not be under the control of a singular individual who could decide to disconnect the service.
That is an indirect reference to Musk's 2022 decision to temporarily switch off Starlink service to the Ukrainian military. According to Van Dyke, French President Emmanuel Macron spoke with Prime Minister Mark Carney about joining a Eutelsat plan already in place with the French military. Whether Canada agrees remains to be seen. The federal government recently designated the former Crown Corporation Telesat as a strategic partner to develop Canadian military satellite communications. Eutelsat says they've already got a system in place. Murray Brewster, CBC News, Ottawa.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. Remember, for news anytime, check out our website, cbcnews.ca. And as always, check out the World Report podcast and tell folks you know. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Good morning. Welcome to Friday, January 9th, and the morning show on CBC Information Radio. This hour on the program.
He would always be the guy at the parties with the fun stuff. If we were going out to a party and we knew Elston was going, he would always have the hookups of drugs.
Someone who knew disgraced former Winnipeg police officer Alston Bostock talks about his reputation while he was a member of the Winnipeg Police Service. So that special report coming up this hour on the show. I'm Marcy Marcusa. In addition to that, we will be joined by the social media account that promotes Manitobans enjoying winter. Frosty Face Manitoba will share some activities you might want to get out and about and do this weekend. We have a strange weekend ahead, kind of a really cold day and then a really warm day. We'll get the weather in a moment. But we begin with also hearing from British Columbia's Human Rights Commissioner this half hour, who's going to join us with the findings of a unique report they conducted about addressing hate. We've had 4 separate troubling incidents in Winnipeg this week. So that's all still ahead. Right now, with other news that's developing today, Megan Ketchison is in for Heather Wells.
Well, good morning. Lawyers are asking for a former Manitoba hockey coach who sexually exploited a teenage player to be sentenced to 6 years in prison. Madison Billick pleaded guilty to sexual assault and luring in 2024. Prosecutors say the case is about choices the former hockey coach Madison Billick made to groom and sexually exploit a teenage player on her team. And a giant snow pavilion on the edge of Clear Lake in Riding Mountain National Park is opening this weekend. The Clear Lake Country Destination Enrichment Organization is working to make the community a year-round tourist destination. This winter, they're using ice from Clear Lake to create a massive snow fort. And we'll have more at 7:30.
All right. Thanks, Megan.
Thank you.
Sounds very cool. Hey, I made a pun by accident. Right? Yeah? Guys, hey.
Sure. Yeah, I'll give that to you.
Oh, give me some love. It's Friday.
You look cool.
Thanks, Abby. Hey, can I just say does anyone else out there feel like this is the longest week of their life?
Oh my gosh.
I think so.
How is it that last week was just like New Year's Eve and still like holiday mode?
A saying in my head, the first work week in January has like 14 days in it. The first work week in January.
Yeah. And everyone walking around, no matter what you do for a living or what you're doing, like it just feels like everyone's exhausted.
If someone told me that Monday was a month ago, I'd be like, yep, that sounds about right.
Totally. And the weather's swinging around as well. So what's today bringing us?
Yes, snow moving into the southern part of the province. We should expect that maybe during your commute home or around the 3 o'clock mark, the snow will be hitting this part of the city. That's around the afternoon period. But up north, we're still seeing those wind chills impacting regions around Thompson, Churchill, into Dooley Lake this morning. Winnipeg -15 at this time. We still have the ice crystals outside. Light winds. Temperatures still hovering between -15 and -12 for the morning before we get to a high of -8 later. Then we'll see more clouds build towards the afternoon period before the periods of snow hit later in the afternoon. The snow will taper off tomorrow morning, but expect some gusty winds later tonight. -5 to -15s in the south, and we're seeing temperatures near -10 in Thompson and the Pod this morning, while the wind chill feels like a -40. Sorry about that. Thompson -24 at this time, so it's more like a winter up there. Winnipeg right now -15. Ice crystals will warm up to -8 later.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
So I'm Marcy Marcusa. That is Abby Adeyemi. Also, Brad Lilly's on our YouTube stream, and Corey Funkin with your commute this morning. What's up now?
Yeah, I heard about an hour ago from Mandeep about a collision on westbound Wellington at Barrie. I was blocking the right lane, so keep left to get around that. May still be an issue, may not, but just flagging that for you. Other than that, it's been a fairly straightforward commute. Might be a little slippery out there, though, on the road. So I'd love to get some updates on the highways or on the trails or on the roads, bike lanes, sidewalks. Give me a call. Let me know what you're seeing out there. That number, 204-788-3093.
Well, as I mentioned in the last week, the Jewish and Muslim communities in Winnipeg have been targeted by anti-Semitic and racist messages. Early Friday morning, the Sherry Zedek Synagogue was vandalized with swastikas painted on window panes and the word hate sprayed on a marble facade. Then Sunday, Habibi's Cafe had their windows smashed and a racist note was left. The note said, quote, "F you terrorists," end quote. On Monday, Kelvin High School discovered a swastika graffiti on the school, and then Wednesday, swastikas were discovered on the doors of a West End mosque. 4 incidents in a week. Earlier this week on our show, we spoke with Elizabeth Simons. She's the Deputy Director of the Canadian Anti-Hate Network.
It's my pleasure.
So when we talk about hate incidents in Manitoba, we actually often have turned the conversation right away to needing stronger anti-hate laws. What did your report find out about how effective police and justice responses are, though, to hate?
Both within the community, but also the broader community as well.
That was Elizabeth Simons, Deputy Director of the Canadian Anti-Hate Network. Well, this morning we're going to look at some solutions and in a unique report that was done, one of a kind actually in this country, one of the only ones. In 2023, British Columbia's Office of the Human Rights Commissioner put out a report called From Hate to Hope, reported the inquiry into hate in the COVID-19 pandemic, but obviously a lot of what they found is relevant overall. They gave 9 key findings, including addressing hate-fueled incidents. Kasari Govinder is British Columbia's Human Rights Commissioner, and I spoke with her yesterday, started by thanking her for joining us via Zoom.
It's my pleasure.
So when we talk about hate incidents in Manitoba, we actually often have turned the conversation right away to needing stronger anti-hate laws. What did your report find out about how effective police and justice responses are, though, to hate?
One of our key findings was that the justice system has not been an effective tool in response to the rise of hate. We were looking particularly at the rise of hate during COVID, but unfortunately, many of the findings and recommendations that we made continue to be relevant, as we've seen that the rises in hate never went back to pre-COVID levels. But that isn't to say that the justice system can never be an effective tool, just that it hasn't been. And I would go as far as to say it can never be the only tool in our toolbox to address this issue.
When you look at the numbers, that's set out right at the beginning of your report. How many incidents did you look at roughly, and how many would have gone through, to charges or even made their way through some level of the justice system?
We looked at over about a 5-year period based on Statistics Canada numbers, as well as numbers we collected from the courts and from the police across the province here in British Columbia. We looked at about 20,000 hate incidents happened during that time is the estimate. It's quite a steep funnel, though, in terms of what comes out at the other end of the justice system. We're looking at less than a handful of successful prosecutions and only about double that in terms of actually the prosecutions at all. So it's not just that most weren't successful, it's that we didn't even get to the point of kind of the investigation and laying charges and going through the justice system.
What are some of the factors that you found? Are people comfortable reporting?
I think that's one significant issue. I think there's obstacles at every level here. One of them is that, hate incidents often, as we know, target marginalized communities. That's what they do. And marginalized communities, many don't feel comfortable reporting to the police. There are some exceptions to that. We see higher reporting rates around anti-Semitism, for example. So that's, there's some positives there in terms of the interactions with the justice system. But we see folks who maybe don't have historically good relationships with the police. Or, many people, we talked to thousands of British Columbians when we did our work, and many people talked about feeling like, what's the point? Why would I bother reporting this when I'm not going to see an impact in the end? Others, though, talked about just that not being the response that they needed in the moment. What they needed was talking to people about who had experienced something similar. They needed some community-based support. So that's what I mean when I say criminal justice system needs to be strengthened in response to hate, but we also need to build up other robust responses sort of across the spectrum of what people's needs are when something like this happens.
So if that can be effective, that community responses, as you brought up, what might a successful community response look like? Did you delve into that or make suggestions about what people told you, helped them?
We did. So one of the recommendations is that governments fund community-based responses, particularly in moments of crisis. So again, we were looking at the rise of hate during COVID. And while we don't know whether we'll have another global pandemic in our lifetime, so we can hope that we won't, what we do know is that we're going to see societal crises. We're going to see weather-related, climate-related crises, for example. And when that happens, we see an increase, whether that's local in a community or larger in a province or larger, we see spikes in hate incidents, including gender-based violence. So we looked at gender-based violence as well. And for example, one of the more effective responses during COVID here in British Columbia was that We didn't see necessarily right off the bat for gender-based supports, community-based gender-based violence supports, but we did see over time an increase in funding to organizations, an increase in providing burner phones, for example, so that people stuck at home with an abuser would have access to get out, would have access to call for help. And I use that specific example because what I think it points to is that there's really tangible ways that we can provide support. Hate feels like an amorphous, unsolvable issue, but in fact, this is something that people experience in their daily lives. And there's ways in which community-based supports can access where people live, quite literally. They can access where people go through their everyday lives. And I think that's one of the key reasons we need to ensure that we have that kind of grassroots mobilization to address hate incidents when they happen.
I want to move to what you said there, though. So in the report, you found that most public bodies in BC, at least, don't have data on hate incidents when you're trying to understand them. So why is data important?
Data is incredibly important. I mean, one of the things that we set out to do in this inquiry is we had heard, during the early months and weeks of the pandemic, we kept reading these news stories from across the country about hate incidents. But we needed to understand, is this anecdotal or is there more to this? Is this really happening, that this increase is as visible as it seems to be? And indeed, we found that the numbers support that. We are not going to take policy actions until we know what's really happening. And we don't know that unless we look at the data. We can't have data unless we have more universally accepted definitions. So that's one of the obstacles to collecting data. If we don't have a common understanding of what a hate incident is, we do have a common understanding. The law says what a hate crime is, but that's different than sort of the breadth of hate incidents that may occur, whether they end up in a successful prosecution, as we say, or not. That's a high threshold, but we still need to understand what constitutes hate. So, for example, we looked at gender-based violence as a form of hate. It clearly is. It is actually captured by the criminal law, but it is almost never prosecuted as a hate crime. That's an example of where we just don't have the data to support it, because police do not generally extremely rarely lay a charge of a hate crime, even if it's motivated by misogyny. So we're losing out on a huge amount of data. We saw femicides, for example, skyrocket, unfortunately, in those early months of COVID. And yet none of that data is captured in the hate crime data.
You've used the word policy a couple of times, so I'm going to read from your report. So first of all, here in Winnipeg, our mayor, Scott Gillingham, said there's no place for hate or terror in our world. That was his quote. Similar sentiment was expressed by police. But your report actually calls for very specific action to combat hate, especially actually at the provincial level. So there was a civilian-led province-wide centralized reporting system you asked for hate to be created, an anti-hate curriculum expanded in schools, a new assistant deputy minister role or hired to lead prevention and responses to hate. Your report was 2023. Have any of those things happened, or are you still pushing for the changes?
Both. There have been some actions by our provincial government here in BC. So, for example, we've seen the creation of an anti-racism hotline. Unfortunately, it is only limited to racism. So hate incidents do definitely go beyond racism. It's often what we first think of, but we see many hate incidents, unfortunately, on the rise against trans people and on the basis of gender orientation, as well as many other forms of hate. And so, we have an anti-racism hotline that is providing some referrals across the province to not just how to assist in filing a police complaint, but also other forms of community support. So there's some positives there. One of the big gaps, though, that the government has not taken on, which I think is really significant, is curriculum built in to the K-12 system, particularly on spotting mis and disinformation. And this may feel slightly tangential to some folks. This may feel like, what happens on social media, that's just a side issue. It's not. In fact, it's really central to what we're talking about here. The rise of hate is very much kind of motivated, pushed forward by what's happening in our online spaces. And a lot of that is because of the spread of mis and disinformation. And yet here in British Columbia, we're not doing any of that education for young people. It just is not included even as a guide, let alone mandatory curriculum for teachers. Our digital literacy framework doesn't even talk about how to help young people spot mis and disinformation. I think that's a major gap and a significant driver of the rise of hate across the country.
Just last before we run out of time. Why are these kinds of reports, like the ones you've done in your view, important for our understanding of hate?
Well, I mean, our hope was that this report would, as you say, help people understand just in the general community what hate is, how it's affecting our neighbors, why people do these actions, which really comes from a lack of community and a lack of belonging. So, we need to do some of that preventative work of community building, but also, of course, to direct policy changes. And we've made some really specific policy change recommendations, as I say, some of which have been implemented, but some key ones aren't. There's a gap. As far as we know, it's the only report of its kind done by a public body in the world around the COVID increases in hate. And so we were hoping that we could kind of break some ground for others to be able to see this is a tangible problem that has tangible solutions, and we are obliged to follow those solutions.
Really valuable conversation, Kasara Govinder. Thank you very much for your time on CBC.
Thank you.
Kasara Govinder is the British Columbia Human Rights Commissioner. If you'd like to read their full report, you can go to bchumanrights.ca. And small apology, only just to clarify the sound difference there. We were up in a Zoom room, so I'm sure it was clear, but you're noticing the difference in sound there. It is 7:26 a.m. on 89.3 FM. News coming up at 7:30 here, -15 with ice crystals. Traffic's pretty good so far today. It is time to talk sports with Claude Fake, who's in for Scott Regehr again. Hello there.
Good morning, Marcy.
So the Jets continue to find new ways to lose.
Yeah, Marcy, it appears misery loves company, and the Jets and their fans have certainly had plenty of it of late. Another loss at home, and another loss after building an early lead. The net result, a 4-3 loss to the Oilers, which stretched the Jets' dubious winless streak to now 11 games, the 9th time that they've lost by a single goal during this streak. Now, for Tanner Pearson, the losses have piled up extremely high.
You're always searching for that one, right? It's not easy. Everyone's trying to do the same thing in this league. Everyone's trying to win, and it just seems like right now it's that wall's 100 feet high, and then we got to knock it down with an axe or something. It's just we got to get there. We're not kids in here. It's a veteran group. We gotta put our foot down and capitalize on those ones.
Now, also of concern for the franchise, the announced attendance was about 2,000 under capacity. Now, the Jets are right back at it again tonight, trying to avoid the dozen losses in a row as they host the Kings.
Hockey Canada announcing the women's hockey roster for Milano Cortina. Scott Regehr, speaking of which, was giving us a bit of a tee up. What's your take on this?
Yeah, Marcy. So, of course, it is just over a week after Hockey Canada announced the men's roster for the Olympics. Today, they're set to unveil the women's roster. Now, unlike the 2022 team that struck gold and in record fashion in Beijing, this year's squad will go in as underdogs to the heavily favored Americans. That roster consists of PWHL scoring leader Kendall Coyne-Schofield of the Minnesota Frost, amongst others. Now, the Americans also swept Canada in the recently played rivalry series convincingly in 4 games. So another twist for Canada, unlike previous years, is because of PWHL commitments, there won't be a centralized camp with the players prior to the start of the games. Here's PWHL player Blair Turnbull of the Toronto Scepters.
Yeah, it's a little bit different. I think one thing that a few of us talked about the other day was just having centralization and being able to go through a lot of adversity together is something that's different, but I think we just got hit with that adversity through the rivalry series. So now I think it's just about how we respond. That'll really determine how we play at the Olympics. Our goal is to go to Italy and win a gold medal, and I'm very confident that we can go do that.
Now, there are currently 30 players on the roster that will be trimmed down to 23 with this afternoon's announcement.
And finally, Skate Canada's Olympic team will be set after this week's Nationals.
Yeah, Marcy, so a sport steeped in tradition and success in this country for years with the likes of Orser, Stoico, Manley, Sally Pelletier, Virtue and Moyer, and others has suddenly fallen on hard times. After making the podium 4 times in Pyeongchang in 2018, they failed to medal at all 4 years ago in Beijing. So this year, some projections do have Canada scoring 3 medals, led by now veteran ice dancers Piper Gillies and Paul Poirier, who placed the distance 7th in Beijing. And for Gillies, well, it's a motherly-like approach to these games.
Paul and I are kind of just learning as we go on how we can support the next generation. We love learning about people's stories and who they are, and I think we've just kind of led by kindness, led by an open ear. But we haven't really been like, we're going to be the leaders. But like, I think it's just been kind of a natural role that, Paul and I have become like mom and dad of the team.
And the duo is competing this week at the Senior Nationals in Gatineau, Quebec, before the final team is set. And you can watch it all on cbcsports.ca and CBC Gem.
All right. Thanks, Claude.
Okay, Marcy, have a great weekend.
You too. That's Claude Faig with CBC Sports. Your local news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Megan Ketchison in Winnipeg. It's 7:30, cloudy and minus 15. A mix of sun and cloud today. We could see some snow later on and a high of minus 8. New details are emerging about a former Winnipeg police officer on trial for drug trafficking. CBC spoke to a woman who knew Elston Bostock when he was a constable with the Winnipeg Police Service. CBC News is not identifying the woman due to her fear of reprisals for speaking out. She says Bostock was known among his friends for always having a ready supply of drugs.
He would always have the hookups of drugs that he would offer at the parties. It would be a white powder that he had in his pocket, and he would go around and lick his finger and stick it in his pocket and then just fairy dust all of us and pop his finger in our mouths.
Bostock pleaded guilty last fall to a number of crimes, including leaking police information and conspiring with officers to get friends out of tickets. Court heard this week that he also sometimes supplied drugs while on duty, sometimes out of his police cruiser and sometimes to fellow officers. We'll have more on Information Radio later on. Lawyers are asking for a former Manitoba hockey coach who sexually exploited a teenage player to be sentenced to 6 years in prison. Madison Billick pleaded guilty to sexual assault and luring in 2024. The CBC's Caitlin Garlick has more.
Prosecutors say the case was about choices former hockey coach Madison Billick made to groom and sexually exploit a teenage player on her team. Now, lawyers are recommending Billick go to prison for 6 years to answer for those choices. Billick was between 24 and 26 at the time of the offenses. The player, who can't be identified because of a publication ban, was 15 and 16. Court heard it started with Billick taking the player skating and to hockey practice, but later involved late-night calls, explicit photos, and sexual acts. In a victim impact statement, the player said she lives in fear of seeing Billick in public. Billick apologized in court to the player for the harm she caused. She remains out on bail and will be sentenced at a later date. Caitlin Gowerluck, CBC News, Winnipeg.
People in Winnipeg raised their voices in solidarity with the residents of Pimicikamak Cree Nation. Hundreds of homes in the northern community won't be habitable for weeks, perhaps months, after a prolonged hydro outage led to frozen pipes and flooding. Dozens of people gathered in front of the legislature yesterday afternoon calling for accountability, change, and immediate help. Hunter Martins held a sign that said justice for the people of Pimicikamak.
The outlets are frozen, the bathtubs are frozen, there's no working water. The school up north is closed until April because of the sprinkler system is frozen. It's unsafe for the students and the staff there.
More help is on the way. The First Nation says additional heaters are expected to arrive Monday, and 30 more tradespeople are set to follow suit. In international news, another shooting by federal immigration officials in the U.S. has touched off another round of protests. This time, it's in Portland, Oregon, where 2 people were shot and injured yesterday in a traffic stop. That's the scene overnight from downtown Portland. The 2 people shot by immigration agents, a man and a woman, are in hospital. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says they're from Venezuela, and without offering proof, she claims they are members of the Tren de Aragua drug cartel. Back in Manitoba, after Steinbach's MLA Kelvin Gertsen announced he's not seeking re-nomination, a new PC candidate for the area has emerged. Michael Zwagstra is a longtime City of Steinbach councillor and deputy mayor. He's seeking the nomination as the next PC candidate for the constituency. Zwagstra says he recognizes the diverse range of voices in his community.
I'm running for the Conservative nomination, but I also recognize that that there is a need to work with people who think differently. And so whether that's within the constituency, recognizing that people may vote a certain way in the election, but we represent everyone.
Swagsy says the area has an infrastructure challenge due to the fast-growing population. He says if elected to the provincial legislature, he'll step down as deputy mayor. A giant snow pavilion on the edge of Clear Lake in Riding Mountain National Park is opening this weekend. Carly McRae is the chair of the Clear Lake Country Destination Enrichment Organization. It's working to make the community a year-round tourist destination. This winter, they're using ice from Clear Lake to create a massive snow fort. She says it's encouraging more cold weather visits to Riding Mountain.
We've been building towards this. We've had this dream in our mind for a few years of creating this hub, this winter hub for activity. So we wanted to create a space built from snow and ice that you could host events in.
The Clar So Snow Pavilion will be a Frosty feature in the Frost and Fire Festival in March. And that's the CBC News from Winnipeg. You can always find more on our website at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thanks, Megan.
Thank you.
Well, that's something you can look forward to. We're going to talk more about winter activities with someone who is not afraid of being cold in just a moment. But right now, let's get into our regional forecast. It's a mixed bag, actually, of things, starting with some snow.
Yeah, Marcy, we're looking at snow moving in sometime this afternoon. That will be bringing some chilly air down south, and then we'll see those frosty conditions and the wind chill still battling the northern part of the province this morning. But for Winnipeg, we're looking at minus 15. Ice crystals still outside. Temperatures is going to stay steady around this minus 15 and minus 12 for most of the morning before we warm up to minus 8 later in the day. You should expect sunshine to fade, and then some cloudy conditions will roll in the afternoon with periods of snow arriving around your lunch break. So we're prepared for that. And that snow will continue tonight into tomorrow morning with some gusty winds to come with that. Pembina Valley region, we're looking at minus 5s in most of the regions there. We're seeing ice crystals there also. You warm up to minus 7 later today. Snow also arriving by the afternoon period into the overnight period for folks in that part of the province. In the Westman region, tracking it from Brandon towards Nipawin, we're seeing minus 15s at this time. Cloudy conditions. You climb to minus 8 later. Light snow will start near the noon period for folks there. There's a risk of frostbite overnight with the temperatures getting close to about minus 21s to minus 22s for folks there. In the Parkland region, Duff and Russell Roblin, we're looking at minus 20. Hazy conditions at this time. You will reach minus 11 with breezy conditions. A few centimeters of snow expected this afternoon for folks in the Parkland region. For Gimli, we're seeing minus 11. Cloudy conditions there. You're heading to a high of minus 8. Light snow developing later in the afternoon also for folks in that region. The Par, Flin Flon, surrounding communities, we're looking at minus 9. Light snow currently falling. You warm up to about minus 8 later, though you still want to bundle up with a wind chill around minus 30s and minus 32s later tonight. Thompson, you are at minus 18. You're going to see your temperature get to minus 14 later. Light snow, and that will stay with you on and off for most of the day. There's a risk of frostbite and play with a wind chill in the valleys of minus 30s. To the lake, we're looking at minus 28 there. A slim chance of snow coming your way. You warm up to minus 19, while Churchill, you are at minus 24 at this time. We see ice crystals there. Temperatures will actually fall even further than this, minus 24, with a wind chill in the valleys of minus 40 later in the day. So take it easy out there. So it's more like that wintry shift from the mild temperatures we've been getting the last 2 days. Winnipeg right now, minus 15 with ice crystals.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Take it easy out there, too. Yesterday was strangely slippery in the morning, like pretty bad. And I don't think a lot of people were prepped for that. And then it melted later in the day. How's the drive right now?
Pretty quiet overall. There was a call I got a little while back about a collision on westbound Wellington at Barrie. Two cars in the right lane. Keep left to get around that. May still be an issue, may not. Just thought I'd flag that for folks. But if you do see anything else going on out there, if you're walking your bike and you're driving, you see something, you can give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number, 204-788-3093.
Thanks, Corey Funk.
Thank you.
Well, up next on CBC, one Winnipegger has a few winter activities for us to consider if you don't yet have plans for the weekend, or if you're one of those people that grumbles about, January, winter settling in, I don't like it. It's time for our annual conversation with Frosty Face Manitoba. That is his moniker on Instagram, has been for many years. I'm talking about Chris Beauvillain, and he is here because he always makes the most of Manitoba winters. Joins us via Zoom. How you doing?
I'm well. Thanks for having me, Marcy.
Yeah, nice to see you again. How many years?
Very nice to see you.
How many years ago did you start Frosty Face? I was trying to remember.
Oh, it's been a long time. It started sort of as a little pet project, I don't know, probably over a decade ago, and then it grew and it kind of ebbs and flows depending on the winter. This winter's shaping up to be a good one, so I'm expecting to see a lot of smiling, frosty faces throughout the next couple of months. Yeah, it's just been a pretty good ride, and it just keeps on going.
For people who haven't followed you on Instagram and haven't followed the growth of your accounts on socials, it really did start, I think, just with you showing your lovely beard and face kind of ice crusted and inviting people to share their selfies, right?
Yeah, it started when this was less gray, and so it was more dramatic. Now it just sort of hides my grays. That's how long it's been going. But yeah, it started because I was inspired coming to Winnipeg. I mean, I grew up in Calgary, so I wasn't a stranger to winter, but I never really experienced winter until I got here into Winnipeg, and it settled in, and I loved it. And it was I was just inspired by seeing people that were not just surviving, but were actually just thriving in winter. And I loved seeing this sort of smiling face, and I really loved seeing the runners who would have this natural sort of halo or portrait of frost around their face, and then a big smile. And it was amazing. I fell in love with the city pretty much immediately in winter. It was a minus 24. I remember minus 24 day in February, and I just thought this is the best place on the planet.
We're rolling some of the photos from your account, and still there's something about seeing all the ice crystals, and as you said, the smiling faces and eyes behind the eyelashes that are icy, and the big prairie blue sky behind you. What do you enjoy doing these days in Manitoba and in Winnipeg in the winter months?
Well, what I love about winter is that everything that you do, during the rest of the year is still open. So you can still go to the Kids Museum, you can go to the Human Rights Museum, the Manitoba Museum. All these places are still open. But then winter opens up this huge range of unique activities that is a very short window. So the skating trail just opened on the river. There is very few places on the planet that you can skate underneath major roadways in your downtown. It's unbelievable. But then we've also got amazing organizations like Winnipeg Trails that is doing free ski libraries all over town. You've got places like Hinterland that are opening up free skating trails at community centers. You can go just grab a plastic bag and toboggan down some of our hills. It's amazing. And I don't think a lot of people realize this, but we have some of the best snow for building, with the best snow for snowball fights. People sometimes think it's a little too light, but if you hold it and compress it and you hit someone with a snowball, it doesn't hurt. It's amazing. So I really think that there's just any range of activities. Go to Thermea, treat yourself. There's nothing like getting a frosty eyelashes while sitting in a hot tub minus 25 in the wind here. It's incredible. Even food. I always tell people we're really lucky here in Winnipeg to have all of these, influences. One of my favorite things is going in for pho, which is, a food developed in a very hot country, but works so well here. You come into a restaurant and the smells and all the rest of it. But so I love winter because there's so much to do. But what I like to do really is just use my imagination and find my own activities. It's my favorite thing to do in winter.
My birthday falls during winter months, and it's often on one of the coldest days of the year. And I know that when I turned 50, we spent some money because it's my special birthday. So I invited friends to this. They have these domes that you can rent out in Pine Ridge Hollow in Birch Hill Park, and they have wood stoves in them. So that day it was literally blizzardy. They were considering closing. It was like minus 40 with the wind chill. But my good friends trudged out there, and we were around the fire. And then you can order cheese and go out by a fire, and you have a raclette. Like it was one of these magical, beautiful things. It was freezing, but it adds to the experience sometimes, depending on what you're doing, right? I mean, that was a high-end one, but it can add, yeah.
Yeah, it's this unique experience that I always joke with people that most people on the planet have probably experienced a beach or sand or a palm tree. Very few have actually thrown a snowball. And I really love going out and seeing newcomers coming and trying skates on the first time, and their ankles are all floppy, but they've got this big smile, and they're just in this amazement that they're surrounded by frozen water and a frozen river. It's incredible. And like you said, you can go high end, you can go treat yourself to this glamping, or you can go to Thermea, or conversely, you can get a cookie tray and slide down a hill. Yep. One of my absolute favorite things to do is build in winter. Winter is the best time to build. So build a Quincy or build these structures. I love snowshoeing, and so I'll go down the river. And winter is also an amazing time to go see the stars. And we've had some really beautiful northern lights this year. But going out around 10, 11 o'clock at night along the river and looking up and seeing stars and northern lights in town, or if you can head out, my favorite thing to do is putting on snowshoes and going out and finding marshy areas. Because at all other times of the year, it's closed. But in winter, you can go and you can explore, and it's just all wide open.
I'll tell you what, we needed this, I think, this morning after what feels like a really long week, and just to kind of have that brightness and remind ourselves that this season has a lot to offer. Just last before you go, I got to ask, what's your key piece of gear that you're like, okay, you're not gonna enjoy any of this if you're not dressed properly. So what do you think? What for you is key gear?
That's a tough one because it really depends what you're doing. If you're running, you're probably going to be warm, and if you're watching a kid's hockey game, then you're going to need much warmer clothes. But I would say my number one key piece of gear is get yourself a decent pair of boots. Ones that have soft rubber. So you were mentioning earlier that it was slippery out. The soft rubber will actually grip, but there is nothing cozier than putting on a nice pair of like Baffin Island, boots in the morning and going out in really cold weather and feeling your feet just nice and cozy. I love my winter boots.
Thank you for being here this morning, and have a wonderful weekend. Thanks for giving us some ideas about what to do getting out and about.
Well, thanks for having me. Always nice to chat, and stay frosty, y'all.
Take care. Chris Beauvalin is with us this morning. Frosty Face Manitoba with some ideas heading into our weekend.
If it happened today, find out today. That's the power of having the news in your hand. Get late-breaking news from reporters across the country, straight to your mobile device. Customize your experience with news from your region and what matters to you. Whether it's big headlines, detailed articles, live events, or on-demand video, CBC News has got you covered. Connect to the world. Download the free CBC News app or visit cbcnews.ca.
Coming up on Information Radio after 8 o'clock on 89.3 FM, 990 AM, or if you're watching on YouTube, Winnipeggers say that lane markings are impossible to see at this time of year. One road safety advocate actually says it's time for the city to invest in reflective paint and improve this for us. He's going to tell us why he thinks that's going to make a difference. Also, CBC's Jim Agapito was out talking to some drivers in St. James about how they navigate things when the lanes start to disappear and things change during the winter months. So all of that is coming up after 8. Everyone has experience with it, so we hope you stay tuned to hear what some of the proposals are to make it better. It is 13 minutes now to 8 o'clock. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for being with us this morning. Well, let's turn to serious matters. As you've been hearing in the news this morning, Officer Elston Bostock was the guy with the, quote, fun stuff, unquote, at parties. This is according to one woman who knew the former Winnipeg Police Service constable. She says he would hand out drugs at parties. Bostock admitted to drug trafficking earlier this week, in addition to a slew of other crimes. The CBC's Bryce Hoy has been following the case, and he's here to give us some more insight. Good morning.
Morning.
So this case has been evolving since last year. Catch us up on the story, I guess. What do we know about Elston Bostock?
Right. So we know that this disgraced former Winnipeg police constable was let go from the force last year. Now, that followed an internal investigation, as well as a forensic search of his phone. It was very extensive, and it unearthed all of these unethical and illegal acts that we're talking about now. So some of those things that came out last fall were he leaked police information. He also took pictures of the body of a partially nude dead woman and sent that to other officers and made lewd comments I won't repeat now. And he also conspired with other officers to get friends out of tickets. So this is known as ticket fixing more casually, right? This week, he pleaded guilty to trafficking cocaine, MDMA, psilocybin, other drugs over the last decade. Now, that includes two colleagues on the force. And we know that his sentencing hearing begins next week.
CBC has, as I alluded to, spoken to this former friend of Bostock. Tell us a little bit more about what we know about her.
Right. So she feared backlash. So that's why we're not naming her. But she says she partied with Bostock in Manitoba's Interlake in the late 2010s.
And what insight does she provide into Bostock's behavior while he was a police officer?
Well, we know that he's admitted to supplying drugs to fellow police and friends, right? Prosecutors say that this was less about making money and more about social gain, which sort of tracks with what this former friend told us. She says that he had a reputation for getting people high for free.
He would always be the guy at the parties with the fun stuff. If we were going out to a party and we knew Elston was going, he would always have the hookups of drugs that he would offer at the parties. It would be a white powder that he had in his pocket, and he would go around and lick his finger and stick it in his pocket and then just fairy dust all of us and pop his finger in our mouths.
So, according to the former friend, these interlake parties and this fairy dusting, this went on between 2015 and 2019. Now, she isn't sure whether the drugs Bostock gave her and others were MDMA or cocaine, but she just says that this stuff got her higher than she'd ever been.
What does this former friend say about the fact that, Bostock was a police officer?
Well, she says to the best of her knowledge that he never partied with her while he was on the clock. And we know that in one case in court documents that Bostock admitted to another officer via text to doing a potent cannabis edible before going on shift in that one case. But during these parties in the Interlake in public, she says that Bostock, he wasn't terribly discreet about doing drugs or offering them up, or the fact that he was a cop.
He was definitely proud, I would say, to be in that role and use things to get away with what he could. Definitely no hiding. Knowing he was dealing and handing out drugs from his pocket, it just felt like, hey, so how far could he go in terms of illegal activities while being a police officer?
So she said that this double life that he seemed to have was like an open secret among friends.
Do we know where these drugs were coming from?
Sort of. Much of what we know came from that internal investigation that I mentioned earlier in that extensive forensic audit of his phone. So that's why we at least know that he sourced from drug dealers numerous times. So in one case, in this agreed statement of facts, he's messaging with another officer about high-grade MDMA that one of his suppliers just got. In another case, he hooks another officer up with MDMA gummies as a birthday gift. Now, there's several times in these messages where actually police are reaching out to him. And they're asking for pharmaceutical-grade painkillers, anti-anxiety meds, psilocybin, illicit cannabis edibles, that sort of thing. And sometimes Bostock, he was supplying drugs on duty, sometimes out of his police cruiser. And he also admits that he once had a cocaine dealer meet him outside a police detachment on Grand Avenue for a deal. Now, I spoke with Tandeep Sidhu about all of this. He's a U of M assistant professor in sociology and criminology. He studies policing, and he told me that cases like this damage public trust.
This is the kind of stuff that makes people angry, in the sense that we have police public messaging that's very stern and strict and echoes a lot of what we saw in the war on drugs. And now, with this respect, we have a police officer who effectively facilitated a drug transaction right outside a police station.
So Sidhu says that engaging with drug dealers leaves someone like Bostock vulnerable to being blackmailed or pressured for sensitive internal police information. Some of that came out last fall, or favorable treatment, that sort of thing.
Now, what does Professor Sidhu say this says about the state of the Winnipeg Police Service?
Sidhu says that this case challenges the one bad apple notion that we hear about sometimes when an officer is accused of something improper or found to have done actually illegal acts, like in this case. Sidhu says that it's clear that in this case, several officers knew what Bostock was up to, and several of them at least did nothing for years. Some actually benefited from Bostock's illegal connections and some of these acts that he was committing. So Sidhu argues that this all highlights potential systemic issues with police oversight mechanisms at the service, and he says within the Winnipeg police culture generally.
These incidents are not contained to a single officer, that they have a far more encompassing web. It was likely common knowledge to a certain degree that this officer was involved in these activities. So I think it speaks to a broader subculture of deviance within policing, and it speaks to a broader police subculture where it's the premise of we will quote unquote protect our own.
That sentiment is something that former friend of Bostock's that we heard from earlier also echoed. She says that she is still too fearful to share her accounts directly with police of what she saw from Constable Bostock during those years.
It's just too much protection, I think, among police officers, it being an old boys club and everything.
So what is next, Bryce, when it comes to Elston Bostock?
Well, 3 other officers face criminal charges, actually, in connection with the investigation that went into Bostock. Winnipeg police say they're looking into other officers, but that they don't anticipate at this time any further pending criminal investigations when it comes to some of the revelations that we're hearing about other officers that Bostock implicated in the agreed statement of facts that came out this week in court. Bostock himself is expected back in court next week for a sentencing hearing.
All right, Bryce, thanks for coming in with your report. That is a Bryce Hoy reporter with CBC Manitoba live with us this morning in studio. The Winnipeg Police Service says they will not comment before Bostock is sentenced. So we have repeatedly made requests to speak with the police chief on this program and through our news department. But that is what they're telling us so far. So once we can do that, we certainly will have that interview for you. You can read more in the story as mentioned, though I'd like to point you to our website because you'll also read how we got here, all those stories leading up, and all of our journalism, including today's report, at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Breaking news happens anywhere, anytime.
Police have warned the protesters repeatedly, get back.
CBC News brings the story to you as it happens.
Hundreds of wildfires are burning.
Be the first to know what's going on and what that means for you and for Canadians.
This situation has changed very quickly.
Helping make sense of the world when it matters most. Stay in the know. CBC News.
All right, what are we talking about? A new year means a fresh start. Okay, make a list for the year and take charge of your life in 2026. Look, I'm not talking about your to-do list. I'm talking about your watch list. Cross off Family Feud Canada, St. Pierre, and this hour has 22 minutes. There's no excuses. Dream big, people. Enjoy all your favorite shows on CBC TV or stream anytime on CBC Gem. Mic drop.
You're on CBC This Morning, 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team here at Infrared on your Friday morning show on what we're calling the longest week of the year, but maybe the year's only like 9 days long. It's just after those holidays, right? It just drags. A lot of people really tired out there. We're going to have a really weird weather weekend. We'll get into that in just a moment. And we will go to Megan Ketchison for some headlines. I want to mention something here, though. We have a podcast called This is Manitoba. If you have not yet checked it out, we hope you do. We drop new episodes every week, and we actually just laid down this week's yesterday, and it's kind of cool because we did a co-production with our friends in Saskatchewan. So one of the hosts there of This is Saskatchewan, and I host This is Manitoba, we hooked up. So Leisha Grabinski is their host, and we talked about what it's like living on both sides of the border, Manitoba-Sask, and particularly the border that we share in northern Manitoba. So we're talking people in Flin Flon and people in Creighton, Saskatchewan. So we brought a report from Flin Flon on the podcast, and then they brought a report from Creighton around healthcare sharing. So really interesting jurisdictional issues when people can just walk across the border and get services in, different provinces. So if you've not yet subscribed to This is Manitoba, we'd love it if you find us wherever you get your podcasts and give us a follow. On the radio this morning, coming up after 8 o'clock, we are going to talk about winter driving. If you've been playing a game of follow the leader when driving because you cannot tell what lane you're in, you are not alone. We're going to hear from Winnipeggers who say they struggle to navigate driving conditions in the winter. And we also are going to hear for a call to use better reflective paint so we don't lose those lane signatures so quickly. So that's all coming up right here on Information Radio after 8. Right now, 2 minutes to, and Megan Ketchison, as mentioned, is in with headlines.
Well, drums, singing, and words of support echoed through Memorial Park as people in Winnipeg came together for Pimicikamak Cree Nation. Hundreds of homes in the northern community won't be habitable for weeks, perhaps months, after a prolonged hydro outage led to frozen pipes and flooding. We'll hear what people had to say at 8:30. And after Steinbach's MLA Kelvin Gertsen announced he's not seeking renomination, we'll find out who the new PC candidate may be coming up at 8:30.
All right. Thanks, Megan.
Thank you.
Traffic moving along just fine this morning. Still could be a little slick, especially if you're walking, so call us. Not like yesterday, though, from our account so far. 788-3093, though, is the commuter line to reach Corey. Mention the mixed bag. We're going to be cold. Today, some snow, 2 to 4 centimeters into tonight. Minus 15 right now with ice crystals. Our high just minus 8. But then we get windy, and then temperature falling to minus 15. And then all of a sudden, Sunday, we bounce back up to 0. So there's your mixed bag. But this morning, minus 15 currently in Winnipeg. Stay with us. World Report's next.
Today on Q.
I'm Talia Schlanger in for Tom Power. After building a loyal fan base in the 80s and 90s, the Canadian singer Jane Siberry sold everything she had and moved to a cabin in the woods. She'll tell you about being a free spirit and how she's used her sensitivity to her advantage.
Q, this morning at 10, 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app. or wherever you get your podcasts. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
There are chefs across Canada who are choosing to cook for fewer people, opening micro restaurants that sit only a few dozen customers. We'll speak with 3 foodies about the appeal of having a place to experiment, serve up the unexpected, and talk to strangers, coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm John Northcott. We begin as Tehran severs all digital ties to the world. A total internet and telephone blackout across Iran is in effect as the country's supreme leader signals a massive crackdown. Ayatollah Khamenei is now accusing demonstrators of, quote, ruining their own streets to please U.S. President Donald Trump, who's warned that he is locked and loaded to intervene if peaceful protesters are harmed. The death toll has reached at least 50, and state media reports that several criminal investigation officers were killed by armed protesters in Tehran overnight. Crystal Gamansing has more.
With buildings and cars set alight in the capital, Tehran, anti-regime chants ring out. Actions, according to Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, of rioters wanting to please U.S. President Donald Trump. After a 12th straight night of demonstrations across the country, Khamenei appeared on state television this morning, warning the Islamic Republic will not tolerate mercenaries for foreigners. The U.S. president has repeatedly threatened to intervene militarily if Iranian authorities kill protesters. The demonstrations began late December with frustrations over Iran's failing economy. Shop owners in Tehran's Grand Bazaar taking to the streets. Security forces quickly tried to quash the demonstrations, but they've continued, growing in size and spreading to other cities. With internet access nearly shut down, reaching people in Tehran and getting a clear sense of those killed or injured is difficult. Human rights groups estimate 40 people have died. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance said Thursday the regime has many problems.
I'll let the president speak to what we're going to do in the future, but we certainly stand with anybody across the world, including the Iranian people who are advocating for their rights.
The son of Iran's late ruling Shah, Reza Pahlavi, is encouraging people to keep going to the streets, posting to social media, "The eyes of the world are upon you." He's living in exile in the U.S. Many protesters are calling on him to come home. Crystal Gamansing, CBC News, London.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump says he is canceling a second wave of attacks on Venezuela, saying they won't be needed. This as Venezuela has begun releasing political prisoners.
Que es materialmente imposible.
One of those freed is opposition figure Enrique Marquez, who ran in the 2024 presidential election, an election that was widely denounced as fraudulent. It's still unclear how many detainees are being released, but human rights groups estimate 800 to 900 political prisoners remain. The head of Venezuela's National Assembly, Jorge Rodriguez, calls the move a gesture to, quote, consolidate peace. Another night of outrage directed at U.S. immigration agents with a new incident focusing protesters' anger. 2 people were shot and injured by Border Patrol agents yesterday in Portland. Oregon Governor Tina Kotek.
My message to the federal government is this: we demand transparency. We demand your cooperation with Portland police because we need to investigate this incident.
Kotek is accusing the Trump administration of tearing families apart and governing through fear. There were anti-ICE rallies overnight in Los Angeles, Washington, and continuing in Minneapolis, where Renee Good was killed on Wednesday. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz is asking Americans to remember Renee Good today. He's encouraging people to pause this morning for a moment of silence and to join his state for a day of unity.
I'd ask each and every one to find a way to contribute in your community. It might be shuffling your neighbor's walk. It might be being at a food bank, but to show the goodness, to rise up, to make sure that we're being very, very clear about this, that we expect our constitutional rights to be respected.
Walz adds that state officials should be running the investigation into the shooting of Renee Good, but the Trump administration has blocked them from being involved. Canada's unemployment rate inched up slightly during December. Statistics Canada just released its latest report, pegging the rate at 6.8%. Now, that's up 0.3%. CBC senior business correspondent Peter Armstrong is looking at the report. So, Peter, what do the numbers tell us?
You know, John, these kinds of numbers help flesh out a portrait, a picture of the Canadian economy that we keep trying to adjust to keep up. And in this case, we see the number of jobs continuing to grow, if ever so slightly in this month. It is important to note, as you say, the unemployment rate is up, but that's largely because we have more people out there looking for work, which is of itself good news as well. But if you zoom out here, the Canadian economy has now added like 190,000 jobs since September. And that tracks with what we've seen in the other data. You know, things were bad in the spring as the tariffs crashed into the Canadian economy. We saw kind of peak uncertainty through the summer. And now something of a stabilization and even perhaps the beginning of a very long, very slow recovery.
All right, Peter, what are we watching for next?
So now we want to see how this picture fits in with the rest of the pictures. So we'll get more GDP numbers. We'll get CPI numbers. We'll hear from the Bank of Canada. We've got Mark Carney heading off to China to try to grow the Canadian economy. All of these pieces need to fit together so we can understand what's happening. And so people at home have a better sense of where their job stands, whether their wage growth is going to continue to grow, whether the Canadian economy is going to start, as I say, inching a little bit back towards growth.
Peter, thanks for explaining it all.
You bet.
CBC senior business correspondent Peter Armstrong. Emergency room physicians in Alberta are warning that acute care in the province is in crisis. Demand is overwhelming, resources are stretched thin, and some doctors say the situation is so dire the government should declare a formal state of emergency. Julia Wong explains.
It's daily carnage. The overload of human misery is tough to witness.
Emergency physician Dr. Warren Thirsk isn't mincing words about what he sees on the job.
It's you and me and 100 people behind you waiting to get in front of me, fighting to get in front of me, and sometimes dying before they get in front of me.
The situation so serious, some doctors say the province needs to call a state of emergency. Dr. Paul Parks, the president-elect of the emergency section of the Alberta Medical Association, is behind the plea.
This is definitely on behalf of internal medicine physicians, hospitalists, and emergency physicians in Edmonton zone in particular, but definitely across our province. It's a plea for a systemic provincial-wide response.
The appeal comes mere weeks after a 44-year-old man died in an Edmonton hospital after allegedly waiting 8 hours in the emergency department. A declaration would give the Alberta government extra powers, says University of Alberta health policy professor Stephanie Montesanti.
It can enable expedited funding, emergency staffing measures.
But there are limits. It does not create hospital beds, more nurses, or more physicians, she says.
It's not going to address those deeply rooted structural reforms that are needed.
Alberta's Ministry of Primary and Preventative Health Services tells CBC News calls for a state of emergency are misguided and would add nothing to what is already being done. The province's hospital ministry points to plans for 1,000 new hospital beds in the future. Julia Wong, CBC News, Edmonton.
And finally, this year's flu season is unusually severe, with infection rates topping 27%, the highest in recent years. Health officials say children are especially at risk. The CBC's Jennifer Lagrassa explains.
In the emergency room at North York General Hospital in Toronto, dozens of people are either waiting to be triaged or get admitted.
We're now feeling the impact.
Dr. Kevin Wasco is the hospital's chief of emergency medicine. A surge in flu cases the past few weeks have filled their wards, leaving some patients on beds in the hallways.
This has been a particularly rough week at our hospital where we are at capacity.
This flu season, he says, has been especially bad, and that's been the case across many parts of Canada, with Ontario, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Quebec flooded with cases last month. The latest data from Health Canada shows that in mid-December, 27.7% of tests were positive. That's the highest it's been in the last 3 seasons.
For influenza type A, we're seeing a 6-fold increase within the community.
Braden Hendy is the chief of emergency medicine at Erie Shores Healthcare in southwestern Ontario.
We've been seeing more severity regarding
regarding pediatric patients.
New national numbers expected today will indicate whether the illness is easing up or still spreading and where. Health officials say people should stay home if they're sick and seek emergency care if they have severe symptoms like difficulty breathing or keeping food down and prolonged weakness. This year's flu is also hitting children especially hard, so experts say parents should monitor for high fevers. Jennifer LaGrassa, CBC News, Toronto.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. Remember, for news anytime, go to our website, cbcnews.ca. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Good morning, everyone. Not quite as hazardous out there this morning as it was yesterday with those slick conditions, but we still have ice crystals in Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for joining us on Information Radio on CBC. Speaking of winter driving, this half hour on the program, we're going to talk about how to make it better and a call to have more lane markings be more delineated and visible with reflective paint. I don't know about you, but it's really hard to figure out where you're going. It's almost like a game of follow the leader in the winter in our city. So stay tuned. We're going to hear more about that. We're also going to hear from Jim Agapito, our CBC reporter in our unit. He went out to ask people how they navigate when it gets difficult. Plus, Corey just got off the phone and confirmed we're going to have a conversation with an Iranian Manitoban who's been watching what is happening and developing there. As you heard at the top of World Report, Iranian protesters shouted and marched through the streets into the wee hours of this morning after a call by the country's exiled crown prince for demonstrations, despite Iran's theocracy cutting off the nation from internet and international telephone calls. So what's that like for people here who are worried about family in Iran? So we're going to hear that this half hour. Right now, let's go to Megan Ketchison. She's in with other headlines.
Well, good morning. More details about a former Winnipeg police officer on trial for drug trafficking are coming to light. CBC spoke to a woman who knew Elston Bostick when he was a constable with the Winnipeg Police Service. We're not identifying her due to her fear of reprisals for speaking out. But she says Bostock could always be counted on at parties to get his friends high. Bostock pleaded guilty this week to drug trafficking. And people in Winnipeg raised their voices in solidarity for the residents of Pimicikamak Cree Nation. Hundreds of homes in the northern community won't be habitable for weeks, perhaps even months, after prolonged hydro outages led to frozen pipes and flooding. Dozens of people gathered in front of the legislature yesterday afternoon, and we'll hear more at 8:30.
All right. Thanks very much, Megan.
Thank you.
And into the weather we go with the details from Abby.
Yeah, Marcy, we're tracking the snow moving through the south. We should be expecting it around the afternoon period or even towards your rush hour home later today. But the freezing conditions still continues in the northern part of the province. We're looking at temperatures in the range of -29s and -30s around Tudule Lake at this time. Winnipeg right now, -15. Ice crystals still spotted in the city. We have light winds outside. Temperatures will hover between -15 and -12 for most of the morning before we warm up to -8 under those cloudy skies, and then we expect periods of snow to develop by the afternoon period as mentioned earlier. Tonight we should see more snow and gusts and northwest winds come our way before temperatures will drop to -11. For now, the southern regions hovering between -5 and -19 this morning, and we'll see highs near -8 with those periods of snow coming in, while up north we're looking at -9 to -30 in the northern part of the province with wind chills and the values of -40. So frostbite in minutes. Take it easy out there. Winnipeg right now, ice crystals and -15.
The morning commute has been pretty quiet, actually, which is usually a good sign. Corey's on the phone right now. We certainly will pass something along if it's urgent for you. And we'd love it if you'd reach us at 204-788-3093. So that call we just got on the commuter line says that Highway number 1 and 206 North at Deacon's Corner, there has been a collision. That is the detail we have to this point. So Highway 1 and 206 North at Deacon's Corner. So please call us with any updates. That is as much as we know about what happened there, but 204-788-3093. And thank you for the call on that. Well, between icy roads and slippery intersections, driving in the winter is not always easy in Manitoba or in Winnipeg, but it becomes more challenging when you can't tell what lane you're in. You know, those white and yellow lines that are supposed to guide us through traffic. Well, what do you do when you can't see them? Most people just follow the car in front of them and hope for the best. And how often do you realize, oh, hang on, I'm not actually in a lane here? Happens to all of us. CBC's Jim Agapito asked some drivers in St. James how they navigate this and what they think of driving conditions in Winnipeg.
My full name is Arek Manya.
How would you say the roads are right now?
They're not good. Just simple word is not good because the snow pile up and they didn't clean the road, especially in the area inside, really bad.
It's early Bilawell. I mean, we never see the painted lines in the winter.
So how do you go about driving in those conditions?
I just follow the other cars and just, knowing the streets.
Evelyn Teano.
How are you navigating the ones where you can't see the painted lines on the road?
Oh, it's hard to see right now because of the snow. Like the line that you said, sometimes it's hard to see.
How do you know which lane to stay in when you can't see it?
Oh, I just follow the first person or the first car that I have to follow so that I be safe.
Does that worry you sometimes?
Yes, sometimes.
Just follow the person who is ahead of you. That's what you do. And if that person is going wrong way, you follow that person. And that's not a good thing because you can see the line. And we all been through that in Winnipeg and the city know that.
I don't know, it's just instinct almost, yeah.
So you're so used to the roads that it's...
Yeah, I know to follow. And most streets are narrow. It's like 2 cars, 2 lanes, so it's okay.
Does it make it difficult when it's narrow like that?
Yeah, sometimes definitely, yeah. Especially when there's too much snow.
So how do you drive cautiously then, I'm curious?
I have to be careful, yeah. I have to be careful because I don't want to get accident. And, when you get an accident, even it's not your fault, it's hard.
What areas do you think are worse than others?
In the city where I live in EK, they're not good. So I would just focus on that and then downtown.
CBC's Jim Agapito out to tee up our next interview, talking to some Winnipeggers in St. James yesterday. We should note the city paints lines on roads once a year, then they apply a second coat to about a quarter of them, depending on weather and road conditions. Our next guest says, though, he has some suggestions to improve the visibility of lane markings in Winnipeg. Chris Lawrence is the head of the Manitoba Heavy Construction Association and also chair of the Safe Roads Committee, and he's with us via Zoom. Hi there, Chris.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm well. So we've all been there, with these issues. What do you think could make it better?
Well, first of all, the mission and mandate for both Manitoba and the city of Winnipeg is to provide streets and highways that are safe in condition, that allow traffic to move, that minimizes the risk to both motorists and adjoining properties and pedestrians to harm. So line painting and line marking is part of the safety infrastructure, which sadly is being ignored by both jurisdictions. And I understand the pressures on budget, but they invest, as we all do and should, in street traffic lights and lighting, in warning lights, flashing lights, and signs, merging, etc. We don't escape the responsibilities of safety just because there's snow on the ground.
So I understand one of your ideas is reflective paint.
Yes, it's called thermostatic. It's a product that is heated to, I think it's 200 degrees, and then applied, and it's specifically designed to handle harsh conditions, freeze thaw, including heavy snow plowing. And the product has embedded in it layers of reflective beads. So as the product wears down, it regenerates and provides an ongoing supply, if you will, of reflective beads that allow the motorist, especially in nighttime driving, to see exactly where the lanes are and help motorists steer their vehicles properly.
Do we know how it stands up against like -40 and being covered in slush and slow and being scraped?
It's specifically designed for the kind of harsh conditions that we face across Manitoba and in our country. And so it's a product that is used, but not used often enough nor well enough.
Why wouldn't it be used? I mean, obviously you can't answer for the province and the city, but I mean, is it expensive? What are the reasons that might not make someone use this?
Well, for every investment that you make in safety, there is an added cost, but the benefit is that you provide a measure of safety. You minimize the risk of injury to person and damage to property. So I don't think it's an excuse to say, well, let's use a cheaper paint and try to get away with it, because that's not being safety responsible. And we all have a responsibility to be safe and be responsible for our safety.
Why have you been advocating for this? What's your personal experience, just at your personal level, been winter driving in Winnipeg?
Well, I think it's extremely frustrating for all Manitoba motorists, whether you're driving highways or municipal streets or city streets, especially in the winter, when you can't really see or determine what lane you are in or into which lane you'd like to merge or move into. And that simply creates unsafe driving conditions, and it puts everybody in harm's and risk way, and that should not be acceptable. So I think both Manitoba and Winnipeg, very respectfully, need to get with the program and invest properly in thermostatic products that reflect and allow the ability of motorists to understand where they're driving and how to get there.
Have you been in talks with the city about this?
Well, over the years, we've made comment. We haven't specifically presented briefs. To me, it's a no-brainer. It's not something that should be the subject matter of delegation to either the province or the city of Winnipeg. It is, as I said, part of safety infrastructure, and it should be an instinctive annual routine by each of the two jurisdictions.
Thank you very much for being with us, Chris. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you. I appreciate this.
Chris Lawrence drawing attention to, he says, a need to better delineate the roadways in Winnipeg through the winter months, and his suggestion, this thermostatic reflective paint. He's president of the Manitoba Heavy Construction Association. He's chair of Safe Roads Committee. CBC reached out to the city of Winnipeg. We were told the city will have more to say about this within the next week.
I'm Suresh Das. I've spent my career writing about the local favorites that make Canada's food scene truly unique. I bit into a chili. Woo! From vibrant street food to comforting traditional dishes.
The most important ingredients in jollof rice, love.
To innovative, personal twists. Butter chicken lasagna.
Butter chicken lasagna. That's what made it all happen.
I believe every bite tells a story. Now, I want to share those stories with you.
New series Locals Welcome with Suresh Das. Watch free on CBC Gem.
Rubik's, Jigsaw, Wordle? Hardly. Get ready, Canada. It's time for another edition of That's Puzzling. Host Pia Chattopadhyay competes against one familiar voice and one clever listener in a battle of brain games devised by puzzle master Peter Brown. That's Puzzling all summer long. Friday afternoon at 1:30 in Newfoundland. And on the CBC Listen app.
8:22 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. on the app, and on YouTube today if you're watching. Thanks for being with us this Friday morning. I hope your morning's going well out there in Winnipeg or across Manitoba. Well, next on the show, we always on the show like to bring you a reaction from Manitobans who are watching world news develop. And at the top of World Report today, we've been hearing about what's going on in Iran. Internet there is down. Phone lines are out in Tehran as following an escalation of protests in the capital. In the past, blackouts like this have been followed by intense government crackdowns. Now, exiled Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi has been calling for mass demonstrations. Here in Manitoba, though, it's left people like Majid Kermani concerned for family in Tehran, but also hopeful that change may come to Iran. Majid's lived here in Manitoba since 2004. He joins us this morning from Selkirk. Good morning.
Good morning.
So how concerning is this? Because there's blackouts, right, as I mentioned, right? The internet, the international telephone calls are down. Are you having trouble reaching family?
Yes, since last night, I lost all of the contacts to my families and friends in Iran, and I'm trying to reach out by phone, but so far, no luck.
So when's the last time you would have spoken with people, Majid?
Last night, it was around 6 o'clock.
Okay.
Night. Yeah.
What are your thoughts watching this unfold as you're watching from here?
Well, I am concerned about the situation in Iran. I feel that the government will not, the regime will not agree to what people want. But I believe this is the last chance that we have. There is no other way to tell the government, the system, that this is not what we want. This is the system that they had is not functioning, is not working, and they need to change it.
What's the last thing when you did connect with family that you heard in Iran about the actual situation there and some of how it's been affecting their lives?
Well, you probably heard that there have been huge inflation in Iran, and people are in very bad shape in terms of economy, and they want to have a peaceful life. So the way that the government is dealing with this, they always give some hope with saying that we want to give you more resources with the subsidized product, but I believe this is not what people of Iran want. They on top of all peaceful life that they are looking for, they want the political system to be changed. This is the dictatorship. This is a dictatorship. So they want to have a different system governing the country.
Inflation, CBC was reporting this week in December in Iran was 40%. So you're alluding to that in terms of how it obviously affects the average person living there. This is not the first time. Of course, there's been demonstrations or even a blackout like this on media or on communication. You said you haven't reached your family. I'm just wondering what you're thinking about this particular moment in history and whether or not you feel this could bring about change in Iran this time.
I believe there will be some changes. In previous uprising that we had in 4 years ago and before that, I always thought that there is no chance that people can win. But this time is different. This time the regime is weakened by sanctions, and people of Iran are more determined to change. And I believe with people being united and in the street all together with unity, we can change it. I have a very good hope that this time will be the last time that people come to the street to change the system.
We wish you luck in reaching your family, Majid. Thank you very much for being with us this morning and giving us an update from what this is like for you in Manitoba. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
That's Majid Kamani. He lives here in our province. He moved here from Iran in 2004. He lives in Selkirk. Leading the news this morning on World Report, Iranian protesters shouting and marching through the streets into Friday morning. This is after the call by the country's exiled crown prince for demonstrations, despite Iran's theocracy cutting off the nation from internet and international telephone calls. If you want to read more, you can go to our national site at cbc.ca.
Breaking news happens anywhere, anytime.
Police have warned the protesters repeatedly, get back.
CBC News brings the story to you as it happens.
Hundreds of wildfires are burning.
Be the first to know what's going on and what that means for you and for Canadians.
This situation has changed very quickly.
Helping make sense of the world when it matters most. Stay in the know. CBC News.
8:27 a.m. is the time right now, and today's high is going to be right around -8, but we are expecting 2 to 4 centimeters of snow into tonight. And actually, this afternoon is when that snow is going to begin. It gets cold overnight, wind chills around -21, and into tomorrow as well. Windy, winds 30 to 50. Temperature's going to fall to -15 tomorrow afternoon. And then, boom, on Sunday, we're looking at a -2 for a daytime high. So it's going to be mild once again. We might even on Monday see sunshine and 0 with more melting. Well, we're going to slide in a quick tune next just before the news. This is Ria May to end the programming week and Light Me Up.
Breathe in the meaning. I've still been reaching for it. Call off the SOS and the war in my head. Just like the seasons, don't need a reason to unfreeze and leave it all behind. Let me up, dark and the dark thoughts. Smooth out the lines and the minds on the paths in my head. Oh, what a feeling, just to be feeling something. Unfreeze and let it warm me up again.
That is Light Me Up from Rhea May, and we're teasing you a bit because you can check her out live. She's playing Side Stage in Winnipeg, February 19th. It's time for your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Megan Ketcherson in Winnipeg. At 8:30, we have ice crystals in the air and -15, a mix of sun and cloud today. We could see snow later on and a high of -8. We're learning more details about a former Winnipeg police officer on trial for drug trafficking. CBC spoke to a woman who knew Alston Bostock when he was a constable with the Winnipeg Police Service. We're not identifying her due to her fear of reprisals for speaking out. She says Bostock could always be counted on at parties to get his friends high and seemed to relish in his dual identity as a police officer and a drug supplier.
Knowing he was dealing and handing out drugs from his pocket, it just felt like, hey, so how far could he go in terms of illegal activities while being a police officer?
Bostock pleaded guilty this week to drug trafficking, adding to a rap sheet that includes guilty pleas on corruption charges, including leaking police information and conspiring with officers to get friends out of tickets. Prosecutors are recommending a 6-year prison sentence for a former Manitoba hockey coach who sexually exploited one of her players. Madison Billick pleaded guilty to sexual assault and luring in 2024. She was in her mid-20s at the time. The victim was 15 and 16-year-old. The exploitation started with Billick taking the player skating and hockey practice. It evolved into late-night calls, explicit photos, and sexual acts. In a victim impact statement, the player says she lives in fear of seeing Billick in public. Billick remains out on bail and will be sentenced at a later date. Drums, singing, and words of support echoed through Memorial Park as people in Winnipeg came together for Pimicikamak Cree Nation. Hundreds of homes in the northern community won't be habitable for weeks or perhaps months after prolonged hydro outages led to frozen pipes and flooding. Paige Papanicus is one of the dozens who gathered for a round dance in front of the legislature yesterday. She hopes people in the city will step up and help the displaced residents.
We need donations of clothing, shampoo, toiletries, anything you can think of, activity games, board games, crossword puzzles, things to keep our people busy.
More help is on the way for the people of Pimicikamak. The First Nation says additional heaters are expected to arrive Monday, and 30 more tradespeople are set to follow suit. In international news, another shooting by federal immigration officials in the U.S. has touched off another round of protests, this time in Portland, Oregon, where 2 people were shot and injured in a traffic stop. Steve Futterman has more.
It was a tense night in Portland. Hundreds of protesters gathered just hours after 2 people were shot. Unlike Minneapolis, where an ICE officer did the shooting, in Portland it was Border Patrol agents. According to the Department of Homeland Security, agents specifically stopped a vehicle they said belonged to a member of a Venezuelan gang. The person driving then allegedly tried to run over one of the agents, then sped away. Shots were fired. Both people inside were injured. Portland Mayor Keith Wilson asked that all ICE activity immediately stop until an investigation takes place. The fact that the Portland shootings came just one day after the Minneapolis killing only seemed to increase the anger and tension. The one thing all officials have called for is calm. They do not want U.S. President Donald Trump to once again target their city with the National Guard. Steve Futterman, CBC News, Phoenix.
A longtime City of Steinbach councillor is seeking the nomination to become the next PC Manitoba provincial candidate. Michael Zwigstra, who is also the city's deputy mayor, is looking to take the place of outgoing MLA Kelvin Gertson. He feels his 20 years in municipal politics will help him represent Steinbach at the provincial level.
I've certainly learned a lot from the example of the current Steinbach MLA, Kelvin Gertson, who has been a very effective advocate for our constituency. And so there needs to be a balance between being aggressive and being forthright, but also being willing to make compromises when necessary in order to get things done.
Zwigstra says the area is dealing with fast growth, and that comes with major infrastructure challenges. And carvers are building a winter wonderland in Clear Lake. They're putting the finishing touches on a giant snow pavilion nestled in the heart of the city. The snow fort, dubbed Klar So Snow Pavilion, is named after Elkhorn Resort's Nordic Spa. Parker Buckley is the resort's strategic projects manager, and he says the entire community is working together to encourage winter tourism.
We've all come together to try and really center our efforts on making Clear Lake a winter destination, and this is representative of that as we try and bring in winter visitors from afar.
The pavilion opens this weekend and will be the feature of the Frost and Fire Festival in March. And that's the CBC News from Winnipeg. You can always find more on our website at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thanks, Megan.
Thank you.
Let's go through the thank yous here for the week. So our associate producers in unit, Corey Funk, Abby Adiyemi, Sierra Sanders, Chidi Akuma, May McKillop, Marshall Hodgins, Jenna Badasso, Dylan Longhurst, Chloe Friesen, Issa Kickson, Sophia Peralta Barone, and Joshua Taifair. Our current affairs reporters, community reporters Shanley Vidal and Jim Agapito, host Nadia Kidwai, Marjorie Dowhouse, Faith Fundell and Bruce Layden. In the news department, Joni Nicolo, Aaron Broman, and Megan Ketchison, and Heather Wells. And our YouTube producer is Brad Lillies, as Darren Marash is off this week. And Nellie Gonzalez is the show's producer overall in our current affairs unit. And Leif Larson is the senior producer of audio at CBC Manitoba. All right, last Friday, look at the traffic.
Yes, Highway 1 at Deacon's Corner westbound. Very, very backed up right now. Not totally exactly sure why, but I got a call from Benita about that, so might want to avoid that westbound Highway 1.
Thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
And last word to Abby.
Periods of snow expected in the southern part of the province. We're looking at 2 to 4 centimeters in most of the regions. Winnipeg, we are at minus 16 at this time, warming up to minus 8 later.
All right, guys, thank you to our Studio 15 crew here live on CBC, and thank you, everyone, for listening. Make your way through your Friday. Enjoy your weekend when you get there. And consider joining us again Monday for CBC's Information Radio.